Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before you start, please leave logic out of this story. Greetings, fellow human. I am Buka, the clever and strong one. Though I suppose that's not saying much when you look at the rest of these creatures crawling about. I live here, under the hot sun and tall trees of this land. What land, you ask? I don't know. It's just here. Cities? Maps? What are those? You speak of them like they exist, but I've never seen such things. No, we live in the world as it is, raw, untamed, and ours to take. Let me tell you about the others, those poor, clumsy fools. Take the Homo floresiensis, for example. Tiny little things, like children that never grew up. We call them hobbits, not because of some John Ronald Reuel Tolkien nonsense. They sound made up. No, we call them hobbits because that's what we call them. They're slow and awkward, stumbling over themselves like newborns. Small brains, small tools, small dreams. Every now and then I walk up to one of them and just kick him. I love it when they try to get up. We, the big-brained ones, the wise ones, will outlast them. Just you wait. Now, those Neanderthals, oh, don't get me started on them. Lazy, stupid things. They sit around all day, grunting and thinking as if thoughts will fill their bellies. Oh, let's sit and ponder the fire, brother. Let's make big tools and die in caves, sister. That's all they do. They die, falling over cliffs, freezing in the cold, starving when there's food to be hunted. Idiots. If you ask me, they don't deserve to share the land with us. I just like their females. They are easy. Just banged one 3 moons earlier. We will outlast them as well. As for the Homo erectus, yes, the old ones. I've never seen them myself, mind you, but I've heard the tales. They were the walkers, they say, always on the move, always looking for something but never knowing what. They lived before my time, and now they're gone. Maybe they walked themselves off a cliff or into a river. Who knows? I've heard they were clever in their day, but not clever enough, it seems. Their fire went out, just like it will for the hobbits and the Neanderthals. So you wish to hear about me, Buka, the strongest and most clever? Well, listen closely, for I am a marvel of my kind. None stand taller, none strike harder, and none think sharper than me. I, Buka, am the man who can bring down the great straight-tusked elephant with my spear. Yes, that beast as tall as the trees and as wide as the river. It was a mighty hunt. My spear flew straight and true, finding the heart of the great beast. When it fell, the earth itself shook with its weight. But killing it was only the beginning. Do you know how much meat such a creature gives? More than the sky has stars. I calculated it myself. Yes, Buka the thinker. If one man were to carve the beast alone, it would take between 10 and 15 moons to dismember it fully. The yield? Over 2,500 portions of meat. Enough to feed our people until the rains come again. This, my friend, is what it means to be great. And yet, even the strongest man has his soft desires. The chief's daughter, Boobs, she is a vision. Her skin is smooth like the stones in the river, her laugh is sweeter than the wild honey, and her chest is full, like the hills on the horizon. Her legs are hairy and my heart burns when I see her dance around the fire, and I, Buka, will make her mine. The chief, Tiny Wong. He pretends to be strong, but we all know his name speaks the truth. He cannot refuse my offer. I will give him 2 cave lion hides for her, each one worth more than his finest spear. What choice does he have? He knows I am the strongest, the cleverest, and the most deserving. Soon, she will sit beside me in my cave, and together we will make a legacy that even the stars will envy. I am Buka. Remember my name, for it is the name of greatness. You wish to hear of my greatest triumph? Sit close, for this is the story of how I, Buka, prove to all that I am the mightiest of men, the strongest of hunters, and the cleverest of our kind. The story begins with my challenge to the males of our tribe. One night, as the fire roared and the moon glowed bright, I stood before them all, every man, young and old. I beat my chest and declared, "Who among you dares to stand against Buka? Let the strongest step forward, or let all bow before me." My voice echoed through the night, but no one moved. Not a single man had the courage to rise. They all knew the truth. Buka is unmatched. They lowered their eyes and accepted their place beneath me. With my dominance proven, I turned to the chief, Tiny Wong, who sat upon his stone throne. "Chief," I said, "I desire your daughter. She is strong, beautiful, hairy, and has buttocks worthy of a great man. I will pay you well, 2 fine cave lion hides, soft and warm, to seal the deal. Tiny Wong, though proud, was no fool. He knew I was the best hunter, the best protector, and the most valuable man in the tribe. He nodded and said, "Buka, you are worthy. The hides are yours to give, and my daughter is yours to take." That night, I carried her to my cave, her laughter sweet as the song of birds. I loved her unibrow over her eyes. For 3 days and 3 nights, we did not leave the cave. The fire burned low, the sun rose and fell, and still, we remained hidden from the world. She is mine now, and I am hers. Together, we are strong, unstoppable, and I want my pups that destined for greatness. The others know now more than ever, Buka is not just the strongest of men. Buka is a legend. Many moons later, Tiny Wong died. I threw him to a saber-tooth and took over the tribe. Buka is the chief. Some more moons later. Ah, times have changed, my friend. Life with Boobs, as sweet as it once was, has become difficult. After 2 babies, she is not the same woman I carried into my cave that glorious night. Her body, once full and strong, now sags like overripe fruit. Her breasts, which once filled me with desire, now hang low, brushing her stomach like an old Neanderthal woman. And her mood, oh, her mood. She snaps and growls like a cornered hyena. No matter what I do, it is never enough for her. "Buka, why don't you bring more meat?" she shouts. "Buka, the fire is too low. Buka, why are you always hunting and never here to help with the children?" Bah, what does she expect? I am Buka, the hunter, the provider, the strongest of men, but in her eyes, I am never enough anymore. It is exhausting. She berates me constantly, comparing me to her father, Tiny Wong. Imagine that insult. She says I am selfish and lazy, but what does she know? She doesn't see the burden I carry, the work I do to keep us fed and safe. She doesn't see the legend I am. I'll tell you a secret. I have begun to look elsewhere for joy. I spend more time on the hunt, staying out longer than I need to. I even linger around the Neanderthals, those stupid, lazy beasts, and the hobbits, the clumsy little ones. They don't demand anything from me. They don't nag or shout. They laugh at my jokes and admire my strength. But what I truly seek is a new wife. Someone younger, someone fresh, someone who will look at me the way Boobs once did, before her spirit turned sour and her body turned, well, like this. I am Buka, after all. I deserve the best. Perhaps there is another chief with a daughter worth my cave lion hides. Or perhaps I'll take one without asking. But right now, my life is a mess. Boobs, the woman I once carried to my cave with pride, is now a stranger to me. She avoids me, makes excuses, and our nights together have grown cold. The thought gnaws at me. What if she has taken another man? Is there someone she whispers to when I'm out hunting? The idea makes my blood boil. I, Buka, the strongest and cleverest, will not be made a fool. I knew I had to find the truth. My first idea? A parrot. Yes, I caught one of those noisy birds that always squawk near the river. I trained it to repeat what it heard, thinking it could spy for me while I was away. But the cursed creature flew off the moment I let it loose. Useless bird. Then I turned to my dog, a loyal hunting companion. Or so I thought. I tried to train him to stay near the cave and watch Boobs. But what did the stupid animal do? He spent all his time chasing after another dog, mounting her like some wild beast. No discipline, no focus, just like the Neanderthals. Finally, I realized there was only one way. I would spy on her myself. For 3 days, I worked in secret, drilling a tiny hole in the wall of my cave, just above where Boobs sits to grind seeds and talk to the other women. It was slow, tedious work. My hands blistered, my arms ached, but I didn't stop. I am Buka, after all. I do not quit. At last, the hole was ready. I crouched behind it, ear pressed close, my heart pounding like a drum. This was it, the moment I would learn the truth. If she was betraying me, I would hear it. If she had another man, I would know. My anger burned hot, but so did my determination. No one deceives Buka. No one. Ah, what a fool I was to think I could uncover the truth so easily. I told Boobs I was going on a hunt, a long one, to bring back the finest meat for our family. But instead, I stayed behind, crouched near the hole I had drilled in my cave. For 5 long days, I sat there, ear pressed against the rock, waiting to catch her in her lies. 5 days of silence, whispers of grinding seeds, and the occasional scolding of the pups. Nothing. No man's name, no sign of betrayal. Yet still, she berated me when I appeared, dirty and tired, pretending I had been on a hunt. Buka, where's the meat? Buka, you stink like a pig, she spat, her words cutting deeper than any spear. My frustration grew like fire in my chest. I needed release, an escape from this madness. So, one night, while Boobs slept, I went into the forest and found some strange mushrooms the hobbits call mind flowers. They said they made the world brighter, softer, and easier to bear. I ate them, and oh, the colors! The world spun and danced before my eyes. I laughed for the first time in what felt like years. Then, in the midst of my visions, I saw a rhino, a massive beast with a horn as sharp as a spear. It stood before me, majestic and terrifying, and in my state, I thought, this is the woman I deserve. I stumbled toward her, arms open, calling out sweet nothings. The rhino snorted, pawed the ground, and, miraculously, did not charge. Instead, she nuzzled me with her horn, as if she understood my loneliness. From that night on, the rhino became my companion. She followed me back to the outskirts of the cave and stayed near. Boobs hates her, of course. She calls her Buka's fat mistress and warns me not to bring her too close. But I don't care. The rhino doesn't nag, doesn't berate, doesn't look at me with disappointment. She simply stands by me, solid and unwavering. Perhaps I don't need a new wife after all. Perhaps I just need my rhino. Ah, the day of truth finally came, and it hit me like the strike of a mammoth's tusk. 2 days after the blonde-haired boys returned from their hunt, I saw it. Boobs, the woman who once danced only for me, was glowing with a happiness I hadn't seen in moons. She was laughing, her eyes shining, and I knew. It wasn't for me. My gut twisted like a snake. One of them, those fair-haired fools, was her lover. I watched them closely, these golden-haired boys. They strutted around with their shiny hair and smug smiles, thinking themselves better than the rest of us. One in particular stood out, a cocky little man I called Yellow Butt because of his yellow butt. He swaggered like he owned the world, and the way Boobs looked at him, I knew. He was the one. I felt the rage bubbling inside me, but I held it down. Not yet, I told myself. I would find proof. That night, I climbed onto my rhino, pretending I was going on another hunt. I'll bring back a mammoth this time, I shouted, leaving the cave as Boobs barely glanced at me. I rode my rhino into the trees, but as soon as I was out of sight, I circled back, tying the rhino to a tree near the cave. I crept back to my hole, the tiny opening I had worked so hard to make. My heart pounded as I pressed my ear against it, and there it was, laughter, whispers, and then sounds that made my blood boil. I peeked through the hole, and there they were, Boobs and Yellow Butt, making pups, their bodies moving in a way that made me see red. Boobs was enjoying it. My vision blurred, my hands shook, and the rage I had held down exploded. I stormed into the cave, my roar echoing like thunder. Boobs screamed and scrambled away, but Yellow Butt just stared, his smug grin fading as he saw the fury in my eyes. You, I bellowed. You think you can take what is mine? You think you can humiliate Buka, the strongest and cleverest of all? Yellow Butt tried to speak, but I didn't let him. I pointed my spear at him, my voice shaking with rage. I challenge you, Yellow Butt. Fight me if you dare, or crawl out of this cave like the worm you are. The tribe gathered, the air thick with tension. Boobs begged me to stop, but I didn't hear her. All I saw was Yellow Butt, the man who thought he could steal from Buka. The fight was coming, and I would show him, and everyone else, why no one challenges the might of Buka. The time had come. I, Buka, stood in the center of the tribe's circle, my mighty club in hand. Yellow Butt faced me, his smug grin replaced by fear. He knew, as everyone did, that these fights had no rules. No mercy. It was survival of the strongest, and I wasn't just the strongest. I was the smartest. Boobs cheered for Yellow Butt. Kill him and become the chief, she roared. The crowd roared, their chants echoing through the clearing as the fight began. Yellow Butt lunged at me like a desperate boar, his arms outstretched, but I, Buka, was too clever for such clumsy tactics. I sidestepped his charge with ease, spinning to deliver a crushing blow to his shoulder with my club. The sound of bone crunching reverberated through the air as Yellow Butt stumbled back, clutching his arm in pain. Is that all you've got, Yellow Butt? I taunted, raising my club high to the cheers of the tribe. Enraged, Yellow Butt charged again, but this time I was ready. I dropped my club, ducked low, and grabbed him around the waist. With a mighty roar, I lifted him high above my head in a move the hobbits would later call the Giant's Press. The tribe gasped as I spun him in the air like a sack of roots before slamming him into the ground with enough force to rattle the stones beneath our feet. Yellowbutt groaned, but I wasn't done. As he tried to crawl away, I ran to the nearest rock, leaping off it with the grace of a saber-tooth. My elbow came crashing down on his back, a move I would call the falling mammoth. The crowd erupted in cheers as Yellowbutt cried out in pain, his body writhing like a fish out of water. But the fool wasn't finished yet. He managed to roll away, grabbing a stick to defend himself. He swung wildly, but I dodged each strike with ease, my movements fluid and precise. When the moment was right, I lunged forward, catching his stick mid-swing and twisting it from his hands. Before he could react, I spun behind him, locking my arms around his neck in a devastating sleeper hold. Yellowbutt flailed, his hands clawing at my arms, but my grip was unyielding. "This is what happens when you challenge Buka," I growled, tightening the hold until his movements slowed, his breath labored and shallow. But I wasn't done. No, I was just getting started. I had a move that would end this fight in the most glorious of ways. With one swift motion, I released him from the sleeper hold and shoved him back. His eyes were wild, desperate, but I knew he had no chance. With the speed of a lightning strike, I dropped to one knee and grabbed him by the neck, locking my arms around his waist. The tribe gasped, knowing what was coming. The moment was right. I'd perfected it in the shadows of the caves. "Buka 316, I yelled as I slammed my forearm into his chest and spun into the stunner, driving his face into the ground with a bone-rattling impact. The earth shook beneath him as Yellowbutt's body bounced off the dirt. His legs kicked out, his arms went limp, and his breath came in shallow gasps. He didn't move, didn't twitch. The fight was over. I stood tall, wiping the sweat from my brow as the tribe erupted in a frenzy of cheers. "Buka! Buka! Buka!" they chanted, shaking the very ground beneath us. I climbed to my feet, my muscles rippling, my eyes locked on Yellowbutt, who was struggling to breathe. The tribe fell silent, waiting for the final act. With a primal yell, I threw my arms wide, just like the mighty warriors before me, and I posed, channeling the spirit of the great Buka. "What ya gonna do when Buka runs wild on you?" I shouted, mocking my fallen opponent. I ran to the edge of the clearing, building up speed, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. As I reached my target, I launched myself into the air, both legs stretched out before me like the wild beast I am. I crashed down onto Yellowbutt with a Buka leg drop, my thighs slamming into his chest with the force of a stampede. The impact was thunderous. Yellowbutt's body jerked beneath me, his chest caving under the weight of the drop. His eyes bulged open for a moment. Just as he began to weaken, I released him, letting his limp body fall to the ground. The tribe thought it was over, but I had one final move. Grabbing a porcupine I had spotted earlier, I hurled it at his chest in a move I would later name the Flying Thorn Strike. The creature's quills embedded themselves into Yellowbutt's flesh, and he screamed one last time before collapsing, defeated. I stood over him, my chest heaving, my arms raised in victory. The crowd erupted into cheers, chanting my name. "Buka! Buka! Buka!" Yellowbutt did not survive. He had dared to challenge the strongest and smartest of the tribe, and he had paid the ultimate price. Justice was served, and Buka remained undefeated, a true warrior and legend. Justice had been served. No one steals from Buka and lives to tell the tale. I turned to Boobs, who was cowering near the edge of the circle. Her betrayal burned in my mind, and my anger turned toward her. She had disgraced me, humiliated me before the tribe. She deserved punishment. I grabbed her by the arm, and before she could beg for mercy, I swung my hand and smacked her backside until it was red and swollen, like that of a baboon. She cried and pleaded, but I did not stop until she understood the weight of her betrayal. When I was done, I pointed to the edge of the forest. "You are no longer part of this tribe," I declared. "Leave and never return. Buka needs no woman who shames him." The tribe watched in silence as she limped away, her figure disappearing into the trees. 50 moons later I came to know that she now dances in a Neanderthal cave. Now, I stand alone but stronger than ever. The tribe knows my strength, my wisdom, my power. I am Buka, the leader, the legend. And this is my tribe, my legacy. With Boobs gone, I, Buka, knew it was up to me to take care of my pups. They were my blood, my legacy, and I would not abandon them as their mother had abandoned her honor. I brought them into my cave, away from the whispers of the tribe, and vowed to raise them as warriors, strong and clever like their father. My rhino, loyal and mighty, became their new provider. Her milk, thick and rich, kept my pups strong and healthy. Every morning, I milked her with my own hands, bringing the warm liquid to their lips. At first, they scrunched their faces, confused by the taste, but soon they drank eagerly. Even the tribe marveled at how quickly they grew. Strong limbs, sharp minds, and fearless hearts. Rhino milk was no ordinary food. It was the nourishment of champions. As for their care, I was not alone. I found a new female, a strong, hairier, and more capable woman from the tribe. She had the biggest butt I have ever seen. She admired my strength and wisdom, and she did not hesitate when I told her to raise my pups and have sex with me. She fed them, taught them to speak, and sang them songs by the fire. She treated them as her own, and I respected her for that. I will have 5 pups with her. Under my watchful eye and her gentle care, my pups thrived. By the time they could walk, I was teaching them to hunt, to wield spears, and to climb trees. They followed me everywhere, mimicking my every move. Watch, I would tell them, this is how you catch a rabbit. This is how you throw a spear. This is how you become a legend. One day, my oldest pup, barely strong enough to lift a club, stood before the tribe and declared, I am Buka's son. One day, I will be stronger than him. The tribe laughed, but I saw the fire in his eyes. He was my son, my blood, and I knew he would be great. With rhino milk in their bellies and my wisdom in their minds, my pups were becoming exactly what I hoped they would be. The future of our tribe, my legacy made flesh. And through them, the name of Buka would live forever. And yes, it is possible that some of you listeners are the descendants of Buka. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome to Cheating Tales Lab. We hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Ethan Hawthorne's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at the screen, seeing his wife Olivia's name. Medical conference in Chicago next week. Don't forget. Ethan's lips curved into a smile. He had an idea. With Olivia out of town, he could finally tackle that bedroom renovation project she'd been hinting at for months. What better way to show his love than surprising her with a freshly updated space? He headed to the hardware store, mind already racing with plans. Paint swatches, new curtains, maybe even that fancy light fixture she'd been eyeing. As he loaded supplies into the car, a tiny voice in the back of his mind whispered that something felt off about Olivia's text. He shook it off. After all, he was a 35-year-old high school history teacher, not some paranoid teenager. Back home, Ethan dove into the project with gusto. He moved furniture, taped off baseboards, and started emptying closets. That's when he found it. A plain shoebox tucked away in the far corner of Olivia's side. Curiosity got the better of him. He lifted the lid, expecting old photos or keepsakes. What he found instead made his blood run cold. Passionate love letters, signed simply A. Photos of Olivia with a man Ethan didn't recognize, looking far too intimate for comfort. 2 prepaid phones he'd never seen before. And most chilling of all, a handwritten note outlining a plan to deal with E permanently. Ethan's hands shook as he rifled through the contents. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of sick joke. But as he read letter after letter, examined photo after photo, the truth became undeniable. His wife was having an affair, and it seemed she might be planning something far worse. He stumbled to the bed, collapsing onto the edge. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. How long had this been going on? Who was this A? And what exactly did they mean by dealing with E permanently? Ethan's first instinct was to confront Olivia immediately, but a small, rational part of his brain held him back. If she truly was planning something sinister, tipping his hand could be dangerous. He needed advice. He needed support. He needed Marcus. Fumbling for his phone, Ethan dialed his best friend and fellow teacher. Marcus picked up on the 3rd ring. Hey man, what's up? Ethan's voice cracked as he spoke. Marcus, I need you. Can we meet? The rusty nail. As soon as possible. There must have been something in his tone, because Marcus didn't hesitate. I'm on my way. Hang tight, buddy. 30 minutes later. Ethan sat across from Marcus in a dimly lit booth at the Rusty Nail. The bar was mercifully quiet for a Saturday afternoon. Ethan's hands trembled as he pushed the shoebox across the table. "I found this while cleaning out the closet," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "You're not going to believe what's inside." Marcus raised an eyebrow but said nothing as he began examining the contents. Ethan watched his friend's expression shift from curiosity to shock to outright anger. "Jesus Christ, Ethan," Marcus breathed. I don't even know what to say." "Tell me I'm crazy," Ethan pleaded. "Tell me there's some innocent explanation for all of this." Marcus shook his head. "I wish I could, man, but this looks pretty damn incriminating." They spent the next hour poring over every scrap of evidence. The love letters were explicit, leaving no doubt about the nature of the relationship. The photos showed Olivia in various intimate settings with a tall, dark-haired man Ethan didn't recognize. "Wait a second," Ethan said, squinting at one particular image. "I know this guy. That's Dr. Adrian Blackwood. He works with Olivia at Evergreen General." Marcus whistled low. "Well, that certainly complicates things. You think this medical conference is just a cover?" Ethan nodded miserably. "Has to be. God, how could I have been so blind?" "Hey, don't beat yourself up," Marcus said, reaching across the table to grip Ethan's shoulder. "You trusted your wife. That's not a crime." "No, but what they're planning might be," Ethan replied, gesturing to the ominous note. "What the hell am I supposed to do now?" Marcus thought for a moment. "We need more information. Concrete evidence. Have you considered hiring a private investigator?" Ethan blinked. The thought hadn't even occurred to him. "You really think that's necessary?" "Look, man, I hate to say it, but if half of what's in this box is true, you need to protect yourself, both legally and, well, physically." The gravity of the situation hit Ethan anew. His wife, the woman he'd loved and trusted for years, might actually be planning to harm him. The room seemed to spin. "This can't be happening," he muttered, "on top of everything else." Marcus leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Ethan sighed heavily. "I got passed over for department head last week. Again. I thought things couldn't get any worse, but this." He gestured helplessly at the damning evidence spread before them. "Shit, I'm sorry," Marcus said. "Why didn't you tell me about the job?" Ethan shrugged. "Didn't want to burden you with my problems. Fat lot of good that did me." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Ethan's predicament hanging heavy between them. Finally, Marcus spoke. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, we find a good PI. Get some hard evidence of what Olivia and this Adrian guy are up to. In the meantime, you act completely normal at home. Don't give her any reason to suspect you know." Ethan nodded, grateful for his friend's clear-headed thinking. "And then what?" "Then we figure out exactly what they're planning and how to stop it," Marcus said firmly. "But one step at a time, all right? We've got your back, man." For the first time since discovering the shoebox, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. He wasn't alone in this. With Marcus's help, maybe he could unravel this nightmare and come out the other side. As they left the bar, Ethan's resolve solidified. He would get to the bottom of Olivia's deception, and whatever she and Adrian were planning, he'd be ready. Little did Ethan know, the rabbit hole went far deeper than he could have imagined. The following Monday, Ethan found himself sitting across from Veronica Sloan, a private investigator with a reputation for discretion and results. Marcus had done some quick research and set up the meeting, insisting that time was of the essence. Veronica listened intently as Ethan laid out the situation, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin. "Mr. Hawthorne, I won't sugarcoat this. What you're describing is serious. If your suspicions are correct, we're dealing with infidelity at best, and potentially much worse." Ethan swallowed hard. "How quickly can you get me proof?" "Give me a week," Veronica said. I'll need access to your home when your wife is out and any passwords or account information you can provide. The more I have to work with, the faster I can get results." Ethan nodded, scribbling down everything she asked for. As he handed over the information, a wave of guilt washed over him. This felt like a betrayal. But then he remembered the contents of that shoebox and steeled himself. Olivia had betrayed him first. True to her word, Veronica delivered results within days. The stack of evidence she presented made Ethan's stomach churn. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hawthorne, but your suspicions were correct," Veronica said, her voice gentle but firm. "Your wife is indeed having an affair with Dr. Adrian Blackwood, but that's not all we uncovered." Ethan braced himself. "What else?" Veronica spread out a series of financial documents. "It appears that Dr. Blackwood and your wife have been embezzling funds from the hospital's charitable foundation. We're talking significant sums of money here." Ethan's head spun. This was so much worse than he'd imagined. "How? How long has this been going on?" "Based on the records we've found, at least 6 months, possibly longer." Veronica hesitated before continuing. "There's more, Mr. Hawthorne, and I'm afraid it's not good news." She pulled out bank statements and retirement account information. Ethan's eyes widened as he saw the drastically reduced balances. "Your wife has been systematically draining your joint savings and retirement funds," Veronica explained. "The money's been funneled into offshore accounts we haven't been able to trace yet." Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Not only was Olivia cheating on him, but she was stealing from him too? How could he have been so blind? As if reading his thoughts, Veronica continued, "Mr. Hawthorne, I've seen cases like this before. It's not uncommon for the victim to blame themselves. But I want you to understand something. Your wife has been gaslighting you for months." "Gaslighting?" Ethan echoed, the term vaguely familiar. Veronica nodded. "It's a form of psychological manipulation. She's been making you doubt your own memory and judgment. Those times you felt confused or thought you were losing track of things. It was deliberate. Memories flooded back. Olivia insisting he'd agreed to plans he didn't remember making. Important documents going missing, only to turn up in places he swore he'd already checked. The constant feeling that he was losing his grip. "Oh, God," Ethan whispered, putting his head in his hands. Veronica gave him a moment to process before speaking again. "Mr. Hawthorne, I know this is overwhelming, but right now, you need to focus on protecting yourself, both legally and financially." Ethan looked up, a newfound determination in his eyes. "You're right. What do I need to do?" "First, we need to secure any remaining assets," Veronica said. "Then, we start building a case. Every bit of evidence, every inconsistency in their stories, it all matters." As Veronica outlined their next steps, Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions. Grief for the life he thought he had. Rage at Olivia's betrayal. But beneath it all, a spark of something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. He would expose the truth. He would reclaim his life. And he would make damn sure Olivia and Adrian paid for what they'd done. As Ethan left Veronica's office, his mind raced with everything he'd learned. The weight of it all threatened to crush him, but he forced himself to focus. He had work to do. First stop, the bank. He needed to freeze any accounts Olivia hadn't already drained and set up new ones in his name only. As he drove, he rehearsed what he'd say. A half-truth about identity theft concerns should do the trick without raising too many red flags. Next, he'd need to gather every important document he could find. Birth certificate, social security card, car titles. Anything Olivia might try to use against him. He made a mental note to rent a safety deposit box to store it all. As he pulled into the bank parking lot, his phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up. XO." Ethan's jaw clenched. How many times had he received messages like this? Never suspecting the truth. He took a deep breath, forcing his features into a neutral expression before responding. "No problem. Have a good night. Keep it simple. Act normal. Don't give anything away." As he walked into the bank, Ethan's mind drifted to the mountain of questions still unanswered. How deep did this embezzlement scheme go? Were there other victims besides the hospital and himself? And most pressingly, what exactly were Olivia and Adrian planning to do to him? The chilling phrase from that handwritten note echoed in his mind. Deal with E permanently. A cold sweat broke out on the back of his neck. He needed answers and fast. But for now, he had to focus on the task at hand, one step at a time. As he approached the teller's window, Ethan straightened his shoulders and plastered on his best concerned citizen face. Time to start taking back control of his life. Little did he know, the worst was yet to come. Ethan Hawthorne stood in the garage, his hand shaking slightly as he examined the small GPS tracker. It was barely larger than a quarter, innocuous enough to go unnoticed. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he was about to do. The past week had been a blur of covert actions and sleepless nights. After his meeting with Veronica Sloan, Ethan had thrown himself into gathering evidence. He'd ordered hidden cameras and GPS trackers, watching tutorial videos late into the night to ensure he installed them correctly. Now, as the first rays of dawn crept through the garage windows, Ethan prepared to take his surveillance to the next level. He slipped out to Olivia's car, carefully attaching the tracker beneath the rear bumper. His heart raced, half expecting Olivia to burst out of the house at any moment. But the morning remained quiet. Ethan retreated inside, heading straight for his laptop. He pulled up a fake Facebook profile he'd created under the name Alex Thompson. It was bare bones for now, just enough to pass a cursory inspection. He typed Adrian Blackwood into the search bar, his jaw clenching as the doctor's smug face appeared on the screen. Ethan spent the next hour combing through Adrian's public posts, making notes of any potentially useful information. Favorite restaurants, hobbies, mutual friends with Olivia. Anything that might help him understand their relationship better. As he worked, a notification pinged on his phone. The GPS tracker was active. A map showed Olivia's car heading towards the hospital. Ethan's stomach churned. Was she really going to work or meeting Adrian somewhere? He shook his head, forcing himself to focus. He couldn't let paranoia cloud his judgment. He needed hard evidence, not just suspicions. Over the next few days, Ethan fell into a routine. He'd wake up early, check the GPS logs, and review any overnight footage from the hidden cameras. Then he'd head to work, struggling to maintain a facade of normalcy while his mind raced with new information and theories. It was on a Wednesday afternoon that Ethan's careful observation finally paid off. He was grading papers in the living room, half listening to Olivia's phone conversation in the kitchen. She thought he was engrossed in his work, but every sense was attuned to her words. Yes, everything's set, Olivia said in a low voice. We'll transfer the last batch of funds next week. Then we can move forward with the plan for Ethan. Ethan's blood ran cold. He forced himself to keep writing, pen moving mechanically across the page. Don't worry, Olivia continued. He doesn't suspect a thing. Once we frame him for the embezzlement, it'll be easy to handle the rest. The implications of her words hit Ethan like a physical blow. They weren't just planning to steal from him. They wanted him out of the picture entirely. As soon as Olivia ended the call, Ethan excused himself to the bathroom. He splashed cold water on his face, trying to quell the panic rising in his chest. This was no longer just about infidelity or financial crimes. His life was in danger. He needed help, legal help. With shaking hands, Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Samantha Torres speaking. Sam, it's Ethan. Ethan Hawthorne. I need your help. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Ethan? My God, it's been ages. What's going on? I can't explain everything over the phone, Ethan said, lowering his voice. But I'm in trouble. Serious trouble. Can we meet? Something in his tone must have conveyed the urgency of the situation. Of course, Samantha replied without hesitation. My office. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Do you need the address? Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. No, I'll find it. Thank you, Sam. Really. As he ended the call, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. Samantha had always been the sharpest legal mind in their college circle. If anyone could help him navigate this nightmare, it was her. The next day, Ethan sat across from Samantha in her sleek downtown office, pouring out the whole sordid tale. To her credit, Samantha listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly grave. When Ethan finished, Samantha leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin. Ethan, I won't sugarcoat this. You're in a very precarious position, but the fact that you've gathered so much evidence already is going to work in your favor. So, what do we do? Ethan asked, his voice hoarse from talking. Samantha's eyes glinted with determination. We build an ironclad case. Every scrap of evidence, every inconsistency in their stories, every financial transaction, it all goes into a dossier. We need to be ready to move at a moment's notice. For the next several hours, they pored over the evidence Ethan had collected, organizing it into a coherent narrative. Samantha's legal expertise helped identify key points that would be crucial in both criminal and civil proceedings. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the office, Samantha fixed Ethan with a serious look. There's one more thing we need to discuss, Ethan. Your safety. Ethan nodded. I've been thinking about that too. If they're willing to frame me for embezzlement, who knows what else they might try. Exactly, Samantha said. I want you to start keeping a detailed log of your movements. Anytime you leave the house, text me your destination. And if anything feels off, anything at all, you call me immediately. Got it. Got it, Ethan replied, feeling both reassured and terrified by the precautions. As he left Samantha's office, dossier tucked securely in his briefcase, Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions. Fear, certainly. Anger at Olivia's betrayal, but also a growing sense of resolve. He would not be a victim. He would fight back, armed with the truth and the law. Little did he know, the battle was far from over. In fact, it was about to get much, much worse. The following weeks were a masterclass in compartmentalization for Ethan. By day, he taught his history classes, discussed homework assignments, and attended faculty meetings. But his mind was never far from the web of deceit he was untangling at home. The strain began to show. Dark circles appeared under his eyes. His normally pristine lesson plans became disorganized, and more than once he found himself staring blankly at his students, lost in thought about his next move against Olivia and Adrian. It was Daryl Washington who finally confronted him about it. The two had been friends since Ethan started at the school, sharing a love for obscure historical trivia and terrible dad jokes. All right, spill it, Daryl said one afternoon, cornering Ethan in the empty teacher's lounge. What's going on with you, man? You look like you haven't slept in weeks. Ethan opened his mouth to deflect, but the concern in Daryl's eyes broke through his defenses. Before he knew it, the whole story came pouring out. The affair, the embezzlement, the threats to his life. By the time he finished, Daryl looked as shell-shocked as Ethan felt. Jesus Christ, Daryl breathed. I had no idea. Ethan, why didn't you say something sooner? Ethan shrugged helplessly. I didn't want to drag anyone else into this mess. It's bad enough that I'm living it. Daryl shook his head firmly. That's not how friendship works, buddy. You don't have to go through this alone. He paused, considering. Look, I can't fix this for you, but I can help cover for you here at school. If you need to duck out for a meeting with your lawyer or whatever, just say the word. I've got your back. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Thanks, Daryl. That means a lot. With Daryl's support at work, Ethan was able to focus more energy on building his case. He spent hours each night combing through financial records, cross-referencing dates and transactions. The scope of Olivia and Adrian's embezzlement scheme was staggering. It wasn't just the hospital's charitable foundation they'd been stealing from. The fraud extended to several affiliated clinics and even patient accounts. One night, as Olivia slept soundly upstairs, Ethan made a breakthrough. He'd managed to access her laptop while she was in the shower, quickly copying files onto a hidden flash drive. Now, poring over the documents, he uncovered the full extent of their plan. They'd been siphoning money from multiple sources, laundering it through a series of shell companies before funneling it into offshore accounts. The amounts were astronomical. Millions of dollars that should have gone to patient care and medical research, now lining the pockets of two greedy conspirators. Ethan's hands shook as he compiled his findings. This wasn't just about him anymore. There were dozens, maybe hundreds of victims. Patients who'd been overcharged, employees whose pensions had been raided, charities deprived of crucial funding. He knew he had to do something, but going to the police now might tip off Olivia and Adrian before he had all the evidence he needed to ensure their conviction. No! He needed a subtler approach. After agonizing over the decision, Ethan composed an anonymous email to the hospital's compliance officer. He outlined his suspicions about financial irregularities in the charitable foundation, providing just enough detail to spark an internal investigation without revealing the full scope of what he knew. As he hit send, Ethan felt a mix of relief and trepidation. The wheels were in motion now. There was no going back. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of Olivia's phone ringing. He feigned sleep as she answered, his ears straining to catch her side of the conversation. "What do you mean an audit?" Olivia hissed, her voice tight with barely contained panic. "Who authorized that?" Ethan's heart raced. His anonymous tip had worked faster than he'd anticipated. No, don't do anything yet," Olivia continued. "We need to be careful. I'll talk to Adrian and we'll figure out our next move." As soon as Olivia left for work, Ethan sprang into action. He knew time was running out. If Olivia and Adrian realized how much he knew, they might accelerate their plans against him. He spent the morning making copies of all his evidence, storing backups in secure locations. Then, steeling himself, he made a series of anonymous calls to some of the victims he'd identified in his investigation. He couldn't reveal everything, but he urged them to come forward to the authorities with any suspicions about financial mismanagement at the hospital. By the time evening rolled around, Ethan was exhausted but satisfied. The net was closing in on Olivia and Adrian, but he knew the most dangerous part was yet to come. As if on cue, Olivia breezed into the house, a forced cheeriness in her voice. "Honey, I'm home, and I've got a surprise for you." Ethan's guard immediately went up. "Oh, what's that?" Olivia's smile was brittle as she handed him a brochure. "I've booked us a little getaway for our anniversary next month. A lovely cabin in the mountains. Just the two of us, no distractions. What do you think?" Ethan's blood ran cold as he examined the brochure. This had to be it, the accident they'd been planning for him. His mind raced, trying to formulate a response that wouldn't give away his knowledge. "Wow, that's unexpected," he managed, forcing a smile. "It looks great, honey. Thanks for setting this up." Olivia beamed, but Ethan could see the calculation behind her eyes. "I'm so glad you like it. I thought we could use some time to reconnect, you know?" As Olivia chattered on about the amenities at the cabin, Ethan's mind whirled. He needed to find out more details about this trip without arousing suspicion, and he needed a failsafe in case things went wrong. Later that night, as Olivia slept, Ethan composed a timed email to Samantha. In it, he detailed everything he knew about Olivia and Adrian's crimes, including his suspicions about their plans for him on the upcoming trip. He set it to send automatically if he didn't check within 24 hours of their scheduled return date. It felt morbid, writing what amounted to a dead man's switch. But Ethan knew he had to be prepared for every eventuality. He wouldn't let Olivia and Adrian get away with their crimes, even if the worst should happen to him. As he closed his laptop, a steely resolve settled over Ethan. He'd been reactive for too long, always one step behind Olivia and Adrian's machinations. It was time to take control of the situation. Tomorrow, he decided, he would start subtly manipulating Olivia into revealing more about their upcoming getaway. He'd use every scrap of information to bolster his counterplan, and when the time came, he'd be ready. The night before their anniversary trip, Ethan sat in the darkened living room, a tumbler of whiskey untouched on the coffee table before him. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the occasional creak of settling wood. Upstairs, Olivia slept peacefully, unaware that her carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around her. Ethan's fingers drummed a restless rhythm on the arm of his chair as he waited. He'd made sure Olivia's wine at dinner was a little stronger than usual, ensuring she'd turn in early. Now, with the clock ticking closer to midnight, he steeled himself for what was to come. His phone buzzed softly. A text from Samantha. Everything's in place. You're sure about this? Ethan's jaw clenched as he typed his response. No choice. It has to be tonight. He pocketed the phone and stood, moving silently through the house he'd once considered a sanctuary. Now it felt like a tomb, filled with the ghosts of broken promises and shattered trust. In the master bedroom, Olivia stirred as Ethan flicked on the lights. She blinked groggily, confusion giving way to alarm as she registered the hard set of his features. Ethan? What's going on? She mumbled, sitting up. We need to talk, Olivia, Ethan said, his voice cold and steady. About your affair with Adrian, about the money you've been stealing, about your plans to kill me. Olivia's eyes widened, a flicker of panic quickly masked by indignation. What are you talking about? Have you lost your mind? Ethan almost laughed at the irony. How many times had she used that exact phrase to make him doubt himself? But not this time. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a stack of photos, tossing them onto the bed. Recognize these? He asked as Olivia's face drained of color. Or how about this? He played a recording on his phone, Olivia's own voice discussing embezzled funds with Adrian. That's not what it sounds like, Olivia stammered, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. Save it, Ethan snapped. I know everything, Olivia. Every lie, every stolen dollar. Every plan you and Adrian cooked up, including your little scheme for our anniversary trip. Olivia's composure cracked. Tears welled in her eyes as she launched into a frantic denial. Ethan, please, you don't understand. It's not what you think. Adrian and we were just what? Ethan interrupted, his voice rising. Just stealing millions from sick people? Just planning to frame me for your crimes? Just plotting to murder me? The weight of evidence was overwhelming. As Ethan laid out detail after damning detail, Olivia's denials grew weaker. Finally, faced with irrefutable proof of her misdeeds, she crumbled. I'm sorry, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I never meant for it to go this far. Adrian, he said it would be easy, that no one would get hurt. Ethan felt a twinge of pity, quickly swallowed by a wave of disgust. No one would get hurt? What about the patients whose care suffered because of your greed? What about our marriage? What about me, Olivia? You were going to kill me. Olivia's head snapped up, a calculating gleam replacing the tears in her eyes. Kill you? Don't be ridiculous. I love you, Ethan. This is all just a big misunderstanding. We can work through this, can't we? For better or worse, remember? Ethan watched as Olivia cycled through tactics. Pleading for forgiveness gave way to threats of ruining his reputation. When that failed to sway him, she tried to shift blame, painting herself as Adrian's unwitting victim. But Ethan stood firm, unmoved by her manipulations. It's over, Olivia. I've already given copies of everything to the police and the hospital board. They're expecting my statement first thing in the morning. Olivia's face contorted with rage. You bastard! Do you have any idea what you've done? I'll destroy you for this. I swear to God. No, you won't, Ethan said calmly, holding up his phone. Because I've been recording this entire conversation. One more piece of evidence to add to the pile. All fight drained from Olivia then. She slumped back against the headboard, defeated. What happens now? She asked in a small voice. Now I'm leaving, Ethan replied. I'm filing for divorce, and I'll be testifying against you and Adrian in court. What happens to you after that is up to the justice system. He turned to go, pausing at the doorway to look back at the woman he'd once loved more than life itself. She seemed small and pathetic now, a far cry from the confident, caring partner he'd thought he married. "Goodbye, Olivia," he said softly. Then he walked out, leaving her alone with the ruins of her carefully constructed web of lies. As Ethan's car pulled away from the house, he felt a curious mix of emotions. Relief, certainly. Anger still simmered beneath the surface. But mostly he felt lighter, as if he'd set down a burden he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. He checked his phone, seeing a flurry of messages from Samantha. "It's done," he texted back. "Meeting the board at 9 a.m. See you there." The next morning dawned bright and clear, at odds with the storm of emotions roiling inside Ethan. He straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and pushed open the doors to the hospital's main conference room. Inside, a grim-faced group awaited him. The hospital board sat at one end of the long table, their expressions a mix of shock, anger, and disbelief. At the other end, a pair of stone-faced detectives conferred in low voices. Samantha rose to greet him, squeezing his arm in silent support. "Ready?" she murmured. Ethan nodded, setting his briefcase on the table. "As I'll ever be." For the next 3 hours, Ethan laid out his case. He presented financial records, surveillance footage, recorded conversations, a mountain of evidence that left no doubt about Olivia and Adrian's guilt. The board members' expressions shifted from skepticism to horror as the full scope of the embezzlement scheme became clear. Millions of dollars, siphoned away from patient care, research funding, and employee pensions. "My God," breathed Dr. Eleanor Patel, the board's chairwoman. "How did we miss this?" "They were clever," Ethan explained. "Used a network of shell companies, falsified records. But once you know what to look for," he spread his hands, indicating the damning evidence before them. As the meeting wound down, Dr. Patel stood, her face etched with determination. "Mr. Hawthorne, on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for bringing this to our attention. Rest assured, we will be taking immediate action. Dr. Blackwood and Mrs. Hawthorne are suspended, effective immediately, pending a full investigation." The detectives approached next, peppering Ethan with questions about his evidence and methods. He answered as best he could, acutely aware of the fine line he'd walked in gathering some of his proof. Finally, as the room began to clear, Samantha pulled Ethan aside. "You did good in there," she said softly. "But this is just the beginning. Are you ready for what comes next?" Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the past few months pressing down on him. "I have to be," he replied. "For all the people they hurt. For myself." Samantha nodded, a spark of admiration in her eyes. "Well, you won't be doing it alone. I've been thinking we should set up some kind of support system for the other victims. Legal aid, counseling, that sort of thing. What do you say?" A small smile tugged at Ethan's lips. "I say let's get to work." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan and Samantha threw themselves into organizing support for the victims of Olivia and Adrian's fraud. They set up a hotline, arranged pro bono legal consultations, and coordinated with therapists willing to offer discounted services. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. As news of the scandal broke, Ethan found himself besieged by reporters hungry for details. Worse were the calls and messages from Olivia's family and friends, alternating between pleas for him to drop the charges and vicious attacks on his character. "You never deserved her anyway," Olivia's sister snarled in one particularly nasty voicemail. "She was too good for you. You'll regret this. You backstabbing piece of shit." Ethan deleted the message with a weary sigh. He'd expected backlash, but the relentless nature of it was wearing him down. "You okay?" Samantha asked, noticing his furrowed brow as they pored over case files one evening. Ethan managed a wan smile. "Just tired. Sometimes I wonder if it's all worth it, you know?" Samantha's eyes flashed with determination. "It is. Think of all the people you're helping, the lives you're putting back together. That's worth everything. Her words bolstered Ethan's resolve. He threw himself back into their work with renewed vigor, focusing on the good they were doing rather than the negativity swirling around him. Slowly but surely, progress was made. The support group grew, with victims finding solace and strength in shared experiences. The legal team, spearheaded by Samantha, began building a rock-solid case against Olivia and Adrian. And through it all, Ethan found himself growing. The betrayal and pain were still there, a dull ache in his chest. But alongside it bloomed something new, a sense of purpose, of righteous anger channeled into positive action. He began to rediscover parts of himself he'd thought long lost. The passionate teacher, temporarily buried under the weight of suspicion and fear, reemerged. His students noticed a change, responding with increased engagement and enthusiasm. One afternoon, as Ethan wrapped up a particularly lively discussion on the civil rights movement, he caught Daryl grinning at him from the doorway. "What?" Ethan asked as the last student filed out. Daryl shook his head, still smiling. "Nothing, man. It's just good to see the old Ethan back, you know?" Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest. "Yeah," he replied softly. "It's good to be back." As the months wore on and the case against Olivia and Adrian built, Ethan found himself settling into a new normal. The pain of betrayal gradually dulled, replaced by a steely determination to see justice done. Finally, 6 months after that fateful night of confrontation, the trial began. Ethan sat ramrod straight in the witness box, his voice steady as he recounted the sordid details of Olivia and Adrian's crimes. He could feel their eyes boring into him from the defense table, but he refused to look their way. Instead, he focused on the jury, on the victims filling the gallery behind them. With each piece of evidence presented, each damning fact laid bare, Ethan saw a weight lift from their shoulders. This was why he'd fought so hard. This was what made it all worthwhile. As he stepped down from the stand, Ethan caught Samantha's eye. She gave him a small nod, a gesture packed with pride and solidarity. In that moment, Ethan realized something had shifted between them. The long hours working side by side, the shared mission of justice. It had forged a connection deeper than mere friendship. The trial stretched on for weeks, a painstaking unraveling of Olivia and Adrian's web of deceit. But in the end, justice prevailed. The jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts, and the judge's sentence was appropriately severe. As Olivia was led away in handcuffs, she locked eyes with Ethan one last time. Ethan felt a chapter of his life closing, but rather than sadness, he felt only relief and a burgeoning sense of possibility. In the weeks that followed, life took on a brighter hue. The school board, impressed by Ethan's integrity and perseverance throughout the ordeal, offered him the long-coveted position of department head. He accepted with a mixture of pride and humility, vowing to use the role to inspire his students as he'd been inspired by the pursuit of justice. But Ethan's ambitions didn't stop there. Using a portion of the recovered funds awarded to him in the civil suit, he established a foundation dedicated to supporting victims of financial fraud and domestic deception. The work was challenging but deeply rewarding, a way to transform his pain into something positive. And through it all, Samantha remained by his side. What had begun as a professional relationship slowly blossomed into something more. They took things slow, both wary of rushing into anything after the turmoil of the past year. But there was no denying the spark between them, the deep understanding forged in the crucible of shared struggle. One evening, as they walked hand in hand to the park near Ethan's new apartment, Samantha turned to him with a soft smile. "You know, when you called me that day, I never imagined we'd end up here," she said. Ethan chuckled, squeezing her hand. "Believe me, neither did I, but I'm glad we did." They paused, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. "What are you thinking?" Samantha asked, noticing the pensive look on Ethan's face. He was quiet for a moment, considering. "I'm thinking about how far I've come," he said finally. "A year ago, I was lost, drowning in lies and betrayal. Now, he gestured expansively, encompassing the park, the foundation, Samantha herself. Now I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Samantha leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. You're stronger than you know, Ethan Hawthorne. You took something terrible and turned it into a force for good. I'm proud of you, and I'm excited to see what you do next. Ethan wrapped his arm around her, feeling a surge of warmth and hope. The road ahead wasn't clear, but for the first time in a long time, he was eager to see where it might lead. As they turned to head home, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. The pain, the struggle, the moments of despair, they had all shaped him, forged him into someone stronger and wiser than he'd been before. He'd lost much, it was true, but he'd gained so much more. Purpose, self-respect, and a chance at true happiness. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Ethan knew he was ready to face them not alone, but with allies by his side and a newfound strength in his heart. The sun dipped below the horizon, and Ethan Hawthorne stepped forward into his future, ready to write the next chapter of his life. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
Life doesn't always go the way we expect. I spent nearly 30 years climbing the corporate ladder in middle management, feeling secure in my career. But the economy proved far more unpredictable than I could have imagined. The downturn came quickly, and soon the company that seemed so stable was shrinking rapidly. I could see what was coming, but I felt powerless to stop it. As my career unraveled, I tried to keep things steady at home. I didn't want to burden my second wife, Kathy, with my troubles, especially since her real estate business was also suffering. She was barely scraping by, closing only a few sales here and there. Both of us were struggling in our separate worlds, not fully aware of the personal storms we were each dealing with. At 50, I found myself back in school, a path I never expected to take. After nearly 3 decades with the same company, I was blindsided by the sudden layoffs. The severance I received wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Our house and cars were paid off, so we weren't in terrible shape financially, but it still felt like a huge shift in my life. Kathy was also struggling, but she stayed hopeful. "Things are getting better," she'd say after finally landing a few showings. One day I decided to surprise her with lunch. I checked her first appointment, but didn't find her there. I eventually spotted her car at her most expensive listing, a huge estate that could have brought in a big commission. When I walked in quietly, I didn't want to disturb her with a client. But then I found her in the kitchen with a man. He had his pants down and she was on her knees. They were laughing and he was making crude comments while she smiled up at him. I stood frozen for a moment, then pulled out my phone and started recording. Once I had enough, I couldn't hold back my anger. I confronted the man, firmly grabbing his collar, but quickly realized that aggression was not the answer and chose to walk away. Kathy, shocked, ran out, leaving her blouse open behind her. The man was still moaning on the ground when I took his wallet, got his name, and told him I'd see him in court. He begged me not to ruin his family, admitting he wasn't the first man Kathy had done this with. He gave me a friend's name to back up his story. After that, I never spoke to Kathy again, except during the divorce. She sent me a long letter of apology, claiming she had done it to save her business. I didn't bother reading past the first page before throwing it away. I tried to keep things civil during the divorce until Kathy realized I wasn't coming back. Then she turned difficult. At our meeting with her lawyer, I handed over the photos and said, "If she fights me, these go public. I've found 2 more men she's used her sales techniques on. This is still an alienation of affection state, and the lawsuits from their wives could ruin her. She'll likely lose her real estate license, and even if she keeps it, no one around here will hire her." I gave them an ultimatum. This deal isn't bad, and it's her only shot. I want a decision by the end of the day. Her lawyer called just before the deadline. She had no choice but to agree. I wouldn't live in the house again, so she had to buy me out or sell it. She was furious when I told her she couldn't be the one to sell it. To raise the money, she had to sell her sailboat and Mustang. Rumors spread despite my efforts to keep things quiet, and she started having trouble getting listings. Once the divorce was final, I moved away. I found a great deal on a foreclosure, thanks to what I'd learned from Kathy. It was a 3-bedroom house on 9 acres with a barn and outbuildings. way more than I needed, but I figured I could sell it for a profit later. When I met with an employment counselor, they laid out the harsh reality. The job market here is even tougher, and not having a degree is holding you back. You should consider going back to school. You only need about 1.5 years to finish your degree, and we'll cover tuition and books. With nothing to lose, I enrolled in a community college that had a partnership with a university, so I could eventually get a 4-year degree. Most of the students were older, like me, trying to improve their lives. I even made some friends and started dating, sometimes women younger than my 2 sons from my first marriage. My ex-wife had cheated too, but the boys were older by then, and we still had a good relationship. In my last semester, I took a workshop on starting small businesses. The final project was to create and market a fake business. Our instructor paired us in teams with people we had little in common with, thinking it would spark creativity. My partner, Gail, was a fashion major about 20 years younger than me. She was smart, but inexperienced. I invited Gail and a few other teams over to my place for a brainstorming session. After we hit a wall with ideas, we stopped trying and started drinking. I made sure everyone had a safe spot to sleep. Gail and I ended up talking about fashion and branding. She brought up how brands like Members Only and Izod made fortunes through smart marketing, even when the products weren't that great. We joked around, looking at our friends on the couch. "What about redneck chic?" I asked. Gail laughed. "We'd have to brand it." Looking at my friend's Aeropostale sweatshirt, I said, "How about Air Raccoon?" She burst out laughing. "And jeans, lardash!" We joked back and forth until Gail headed to bed. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. That's when it hit me. We had our fake business idea. My administrative and marketing skills would pair perfectly with her fashion and production expertise. I made coffee, and Gail helped with breakfast. As everyone else slowly woke up, some ate while others just nursed their coffee and juice. I asked Gail to stay after everyone left, and I shared my idea. She grinned. I was thinking the same thing. She designed a logo of a raccoon, but something was missing. Then it came to me. Wings. It's Air Raccoon after all. She agreed and adjusted the design, and it looked much better. She also created the Lardash logo, a cheeky design shaped like 2 bum cheeks for the rear pocket. We now had a design, business plan, and marketing strategy. Time to move forward. Gail didn't have money but had the talent for production. I could handle the rest. Later, I asked her, "Wouldn't it be great to have real products, not just graphics? What do we need?" She explained we'd need a professional programmable monogram machine, costing anywhere from $7,000 to $15,000 new, or less if we found a used one. "That's more than I thought," I said, "but it's doable. Gail, how about this? I'll fund the startup, you handle design and production, and I'll take care of the rest." She thought about it for just a moment and agreed. I hired a lawyer to draw up a fair deal. The company would be called Redneck Chic Clothing Company, and I'd own the trademarks for Air Raccoon, while Gail would own the Lardash trademark. Since I was funding everything, I got 65%, and Gail got 35%. She wasn't thrilled with the split, but eventually agreed, knowing I could easily replace her. We found a $12,000 machine for $4,000 from a seller desperate to unload it, and had it delivered to my garage. After some training, Gail was thrilled and got to work. We bought 6 dozen assorted t-shirts, men's in black and dark red, women's in pink, yellow, and gray, plus black and white hats. Gail programmed the machine, and soon it was running, stitching our logos in a blend of silver, white, and black threads. The wings on the raccoon had a gossamer look exactly as we envisioned. We had Alice, Jamie, and some friends model the clothes. Gail insisted on getting an overlock machine to sew prototype jeans, which wasn't as pricey as the monogrammer. We even got help from some students in the TV and radio department to make a commercial. The ad featured Alice wearing our work jeans and Air Raccoon shirt, helping Jamie on the farm. Later, she wore the dressier version with a pink shirt, confidently looking into the camera. The tagline, "Lardash jeans, definitely not for little girls." The instructor was shocked by our success, and we aced the course. More importantly, we started getting real product requests and built a strong local following. Gail and I had different ideas about the business, but we agreed on many key points. I had a 48x36 metal building on my property, so we applied for a zoning waiver as a cottage industry, got approved, and remodeled it. We added insulation, a heat pump, a 2-stall bathroom, and a break room. We installed 12 new Melcro machines and advertised for employees. We were fortunate. The area had a history of textile work, so there were many skilled sewers. We received 900 applications for just 12 positions. We tested each candidate, ensuring they could handle the machines. By the end of the week, we had 11 hires. The last hire came unexpectedly, a woman in her 60s named Mavis. She didn't apply formally but showed up asking for a chance. She had 50 years of experience sewing everything from shirts to sales and was in desperate need of work after her husband passed. Despite not knowing the machines, she was confident she could figure it out. I gave her a shot, and she teared up with gratitude. Gail wasn't thrilled at first, but was impressed by how quickly Mavis learned. She mastered the basics in 3 hours. We paid employees minimum wage plus a production bonus if they operated the machines at 80% efficiency, averaging $9 an hour. We couldn't offer full insurance, but arranged a deal for 4 doctor visits a year for $20 and up to 3 free generic prescriptions. It wasn't much, but the workers appreciated the effort. Most of them were middle-aged, with experience in the textile industry. Mavis naturally became the floor manager, acting like a grandmother and motivator to the team. We had each employee make a shirt in all 5 colors, with their names monogrammed, which became their uniforms. They voted to work 9-hour days Monday through Thursday and 4 hours on Friday, with overtime available if needed. Birthdays were celebrated with a party, paid day off, or extra pay, and we always gave a nice gift. Mavis got a 19-inch flat screen, a Blu-ray player, and a year of Netflix as a birthday gift. She cried for an hour before heading home. Gail grumbled about the cost, as money was starting to become her focus. For a year, we kept expanding, adding a mini shift of college kids working nights and Saturdays, but still couldn't keep up. Eventually, I told Gail we needed to find a bigger facility. "How big?" she asked, trying to hide her excitement. After reviewing projections for a month, I replied, "Big enough for at least 100 machines and space for your jeans line. We might need 2 buildings." Gail was thrilled. We found a large facility and a smaller one nearby. We planned to bring in 25 machines at a time with a full setup in a year. Gail began shopping for overlock sewing machines to start the jeans production. The business had grown too big for us to handle alone. We needed managers for the plant, production, office, HR, and accounting. Our original workers were nervous about the changes, fearing the loss of the informal environment they liked. I reassured them during a meeting. "We're not moving you. Your jobs are safe. I'll still be around, and Mavis Turner will manage day-to-day operations starting Monday." Everyone cheered. Mavis was a natural leader and had already been solving many floor problems. She was hesitant at first, but accepted the role when I doubled her pay. I also gave all the original workers a bonus of 2 weeks' pay as a thank you. Gail thought I was spoiling them, but I believed in investing in loyalty. The real branding breakthrough came from Mavis. Her great-nephew, a race car driver, had just moved up to the Busch Series, the equivalent of AAA in baseball. He was one of the few black racers on the circuit. Mavis asked for a day off to see him, and I had an idea. "I'll give you the day off with pay if you bring him by for lunch. I'll treat everyone if I can have a few minutes alone with him." She was thrilled, and I saw a golden opportunity for our brand. I did some research on Mavis's nephew. He had a solid racing record and was well-liked. He was married with 1 child, and his wife was on the plus side, which aligned well with our brand. When Mavis brought him in, he was friendly, posed for photos, and made everyone laugh, gaining some loyal fans that day. Later, I got him alone in my office. "How'd you get into racing?" I asked. He explained his dad had been a mechanic who dabbled in dirt track racing. He started with go-karts at age 10 and moved on to dirt track cars by 15. Now he was set to race in the Busch Series. I was impressed. "How do you think you'll do with the right sponsorship?" "We're running on a tight budget, but I should do all right." I cut to the chase. "Let's talk business. My company's growing, but we're not there yet. Send me some numbers to get a raccoon on your car. In the meantime, how about doing some ads for us, you and your wife? We'll pay you the going rate and work sponsorship into the deal later. Think about it." I knew I was in over my head. I went to see my old professor, the one who'd helped me start this journey. He was happy to see me, and even introduced me to his class as a success story. Afterward, over coffee, I asked if he was really retiring. "Yes, after this semester," he said. I smiled. "No, you're not. You're going to be vice president of development at Redneck Chic Clothing." He was stunned. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely. I need your connections in the academic and business world. Start building a team. We'll discuss salary later." I had already talked to Gail, and she was so focused on setting up the jeans factory, she agreed without hesitation. We also got lucky with new hires. My oldest son had just been downsized, so I hired him as our controller. He and his pregnant wife moved into a house I leased as a signing bonus. She became my personal assistant. Gail then introduced me to her aunt Amaryllis, who preferred to be called Amy. At 46, she was fit, professional, and very attractive. Without realizing it, I had hired her as our office manager. I figured even if she wasn't the best at the job, it'd be nice to have her around. Sexist, I know. Finally, my youngest son joined us as our materials manager. We didn't need a warehouse yet, but with bigger plans on the horizon, it was only a matter of time. We held a meeting with the key team: Gail, Amy, Ralph, my old professor Barry, our lawyer Greg, my son Jerry, and me. We needed to establish a chain of command to expand the company nationally. I was named CEO, Gail became VP of the jeans division, Ralph would manage the t-shirt plant, Greg and Amy would oversee the office, and Jerry would focus on streamlining materials and potential warehouse issues. Debbie, Greg's wife, would help with expansion projects. We set salaries and agreed on profit sharing, though there were no ownership options yet. Our sales were booming, and we struggled to keep up. The first 25 machines were online, and for a brief time, we were ahead of schedule. Betty, one of the original workers, was promoted to manage the new section. Barry suggested we incorporate and consider going public, but I wasn't thrilled about it, especially since we didn't manufacture our own shirts, which were foreign-made. Jerry came to me with an idea. Why not make our own shirts in the U.S.? He explained there were plenty of empty factories and skilled workers, plus government incentives to hire older workers. After reviewing the costs, we found it would add about 75 cents per shirt. Gail and Barry weren't on board, but both sons, Amy and Ralph, thought it was worth exploring, especially with the Made in America appeal. Debbie had just given birth to our first granddaughter, so she couldn't travel. I went with Jerry and Amy to visit potential locations. We found a perfect mid-sized building in a rural area that used to be a shirt factory. The local governments offered grants and incentives, making it an attractive option. However, Gail strongly opposed it, pushing for outsourcing to China for higher profits. I refused, saying, "This company will never move out of the country. It's about pride, not just profit." Jerry later pointed out that even if we made shirts here, the fabric would still come from China. However, he had a solution. A nearby American fabric plant that could meet our needs, adding about 50 cents per shirt, but making the product 100% American-made. Together, these changes would increase costs by $1.25 per shirt. Ralph and Amy supported raising prices to match the higher quality. Gail continued to object as she sourced her denim cheaply from Malaysia, boosting her division's profits. We started to disagree more frequently. At 24, Gail had changed. She wore designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and drove a Lexus. Her focus had shifted, and it was clear that money was clouding her judgment. Since Debbie ran errands for me, I gave her my company SUV and drove my truck to work. Ralph got the same SUV model, thinking we'd get a better deal buying two. Amy called me for a meeting. She had taken over HR after our original hire got caught in a pill sting, which we didn't expect. At 53, Amy had the right qualifications and was now managing HR for 225 hourly workers and 40 salaried employees across our operations. It was time to implement a health plan. Amy invited me to the sewing plant, where she had been staffing the operation for 6 weeks. The plant was almost ready to produce its first shirts, though still not fully staffed. I flew in on Friday to check on the progress. Amy greeted me with a big hug at the airport, and I realized how long it had been since my last relationship. It had been 4 years since my split from Kathy, and 3 since we started the company. I hadn't dated in almost 2 years. Noticing me glance at her, Amy teased, "What are you doing?" I blushed. "Just enjoying the view." She laughed, joking that some people thought I might be gay. We arrived at the plant, where I noticed tents and a crowd gathered. It turned out to be our first annual company picnic. Amy introduced me to the employees as the founder and CEO, and I was touched by the applause. I made sure to talk to each employee and their families. The highlight was when the oldest employee, a 67-year-old grandmother, presented me with the first shirt made at the plant. I had it monogrammed by Mavis, framed and hung in my office. The company was thriving. Greg kept our finances stable, and Mavis and her team worked on new product designs, including a long tail line of collared shirts with a larger raccoon logo. We were also developing jackets with an even bigger logo. Mavis, now 65, even made a stuffed raccoon toy for her granddaughter, complete with wings. During a rare half-day off, I stopped by to see Mavis, who admitted she missed sewing but was proud of her work. When I asked about her retirement plans, she hugged me and said, "Not until you run me out. I've never been happier and am so grateful for this opportunity." I smiled and replied, "You'll probably outlast me." I was captivated by the stuffed raccoon Mavis made. So I had her make one for my granddaughter, which became her favorite toy. Mavis even made one for me that I kept on my desk. After a year of seeing it, I realized the potential. No stuffed animals were made in the US anymore. I put Jerry in charge, and a month later he had a plan. We set up a small factory with 14 employees using older machines, which produced high-quality toys. Gail opposed the idea, but I made the factory independent and owned solely by me under the Redneck Chic license, which appeased her. Since Mavis designed the raccoon, I gave her 25 cents per toy sold, and her quarterly checks rivaled her salary. Gail, now mostly at the jeans plant, had a new boyfriend, and Greg wasn't impressed with him. Meanwhile, we signed Will Turner, Mavis's nephew and a rising race car driver, and his wife Mary as endorsers. Initially hesitant, Mary eventually embraced our brand, modeling our jeans and shirts. Will promoted our products at the racetrack, handing out hats and shirts, and even launched our long tail line. When we raised prices after going all-American, sales dipped briefly, so I posted a video explaining the price hike and used the phrase, "How much is your country worth to you?" Sales quickly rebounded. The stuffed raccoons became a hit, and we donated them to factory workers and local hospitals. ESPN featured Will handing out toys, nicknaming him the Raccoon Fairy, which caught on among his fans and fellow drivers. His car even featured the raccoon logo, boosting his popularity, especially with kids. As demand grew, we doubled the toy production. However, the stress of expanding the company and long work hours caught up to me, and I collapsed from exhaustion. My doctor warned me to start exercising and delegating more, or I'd face serious health issues. Surrounded by my family and team in the hospital, I realized it was time to make some changes. Debbie and Maria gave me a hard time, saying I needed to live long enough to meet my grandson due in 6 months. Maria also revealed she was pregnant, showing me her engagement ring and teasing, "You've got a lot to live for, old man." They joked that I needed a wife to keep me alive long enough to nag me to end of life. Amy and others stopped by, and Ralph and Barry teased me about taking it easy. What surprised me most was Amy, who was emotional and scolded me for not realizing how many people depended on me. Mavis, too, hugged me tightly, crying and making me promise to take care of myself. After 3 days in the hospital, I returned to the office where production stopped as everyone hugged me. Amy and Mavis then set up a schedule where I would work until lunchtime, then go home to rest. Amy often joined me for lunch to ensure I ate healthy, keeping me from indulging in fast food. I came to enjoy these lunches, especially since Amy and I hadn't spent much time together before. We talked about our lives, and I shared my experiences with failed marriages due to cheating. Amy opened up about her own divorce 6 years ago, sharing her hatred for cheaters and how she was glad to be rid of her ex-husband. I asked if she was seeing anyone, and she joked that her boss kept her too busy for a relationship. I laughed and admitted that while I had once sworn off marriage, I was rethinking it, believing that I could eventually find the right woman. The conversation shifted when Amy mentioned Gail's talk of moving the jeans operation to China. Gail had been spending more time at the main office and was engaged to someone Amy didn't like. Gail seemed frustrated with being a business owner instead of pursuing her original dream of being a fashion designer. And she still resented not getting a 50-50th split when we set up the business. I was surprised, as I had felt 35% was generous, considering I came up with the concept, name, and funding. It made me think that perhaps it was time for us to part ways. Amy seemed surprised, especially since Gail was her niece. "I don't think that's a good idea. Gail needs your guidance, and she wouldn't do nearly as well on her own," I grunted. "Just talking, but make sure she knows. No part of my company is going to China. We're making good money, and 300 Americans depend on us, not counting our suppliers." Amy nodded. "I'll tell her, but if she pushes, do what's best for the company. I trust you to make the right call." She held my hand for a moment before realizing and pulling back. We promoted Jerry to help with daily operations, and Ralph took on more of my duties. Since I was working half days, Debbie became Ralph's assistant. I knew something was up when Greg invited me to lunch on Sunday. Both Debbie and Maria were pregnant. Debbie was 7.5 months along, and Maria was 5.5 months. During a quiet meal, I finally asked, "What's going on?" The women left, and the boys hesitated before telling me the issue. "Dad, Mom is in bad shape. She lost her job, caught her husband cheating, and her house is in foreclosure. Can we help her?" Greg explained they had found her an apartment and would cover the first year's rent and utilities, while Jerry would add her to his phone plan. Then Jerry added, "She needs a job. Gail's assistant just quit, and we think she'd be a good fit. Gail might be more polite since she's our mom." I didn't like the idea, but reluctantly agreed. Fine, but keep her away from me. If she causes problems, she's out. The boys were relieved. Thanks, Pop. You won't even know she's there. Maria and Debbie hugged me, clearly happy with my decision. Maria said, "You're a good man, Papacita." Debbie whispered her thanks, adding that she'd been against letting Rosalind move in with them. I told Amy about it at lunch on Tuesday. She wasn't thrilled. Are you sure? You don't need more stress? I'll manage. She's their mother, and Gail will keep her busy. Amy laughed. Gail wasn't happy, but I used all my HR skills to get her to accept it. She's calmed down a bit since. Rosalind arrived the next week and immediately started complaining. Her apartment was too small, the commute was too long, and she didn't like Gail. Greg and Jerry had a talk with her. We're doing our best, Mom. If you don't like the apartment, you can move, but you'll have to pay your own rent. Gail can be tough, but maybe you can be a good influence. If you can't handle it, we'll help you find another job. That shut her up. She knew she wouldn't find a better job, and the thought of paying her own way didn't appeal to her. I saw her 2 weeks later at a meeting. She'd gained some weight, had shorter hair, but still had those striking blue eyes. She greeted me. "Zach, how are you?" "I'm fine, Roz. How have you been?" She didn't like being called Roz, but she kept calm. "I've had better days. Thanks for your help. It means a lot to me and the boys. So, how do you like being a rich business owner?" "A bit different from what we imagined years ago." I smiled. "Didn't expect a crowd of grandkids either. Can't wait to meet our grandsons." Before I could say more, Amy walked over and put her hand on my arm. There was some silent tension between her and Rosalind, like a mental standoff. Amy then said, "Time to start the meeting, Zach. Let's keep it short. I want to try that new Mexican place for lunch." She addressed Rosalind with a dismissive, "Rosalind!" And I saw Rosalind tense up. Trying to lighten things, I said, "Let's get to business. I'll see you at Jerry's house for lunch on Sunday." Amy gripped my arm tighter when I mentioned it, and I began wondering, was she jealous? During lunch, I caught Amy's eye a few times. She asked, "What, do I have food on my blouse?" "No, just a question. Do we still contribute to the Giles Center? If so, can you get me 2 tickets to Jersey Boys?" She nodded. "I'm sure I can arrange that." "Great. Now a business question. If I take an employee as a date, would that be an issue?" She looked serious. "I wouldn't recommend it. Relationships with employees can lead to trouble, especially if they end badly. Don't mix business and personal life, Zach." I pretended to be disappointed. "Too bad. I was hoping you'd go with me. I know you love musicals." She nearly choked on her tea before recovering. "You'll pick me up at 6. We'll have dinner at a nice restaurant I choose, and we'll attend the show as corporate officers, supporting the center. This is strictly a business event, not a date. Clear?" "So that's a yes?" I asked. "Yes, now finish your lunch. And don't touch the salt shaker or you won't be able to applaud on Friday." I sent her flowers on Friday with a card reading, "In appreciation of a loyal employee." Strictly business, of course. Debbie heard about the flowers and confronted me. "Flowers for Amy? You romantic." I tried to downplay it. "Just a gesture of appreciation." Before she could say more, Maria burst in. "Is it true?" she asked Debbie, who nodded. Maria grinned and said, "Just so you know, Amy took a half-day vacation, so did we. We're going for a spa treatment and shopping. You better appreciate this." Maria cut me off. "Give it up, Pop. She's been into you for about a year. She nearly collapsed when you got sick. Men are clueless. I've seen how you look at her when she's not looking. You want her just as much." Debbie jumped in. "Don't screw this up. If you do, Sunday lunches with your grandkids will be a thing of the past." I leaned back and smiled. "What happened to my right to privacy?" "Long gone. Good luck, Papacita." Maria laughed as she and Debbie left. I sent Amy flowers Friday morning with a card that read, "In appreciation of a loyal employee." Strictly business, of course. Within 45 minutes, Debbie stormed into my office. "Flowers for Amy? You romantic," she teased. I shrugged. "Just a gesture of appreciation, no big deal." Maria then charged in, grinning. "She took a half-day vacation, Pop. So did we. We're all going for a spa day, followed by shopping. You better appreciate it." I tried to protest, but Maria cut me off. "Face it, Pop. She's into you, and you want her too." Debbie added, "Don't blow this. You need her, and she needs you. Plus, we could use a better mother-in-law." I gave in. "Anything else?" Maria checked her watch. "Yeah, Greg and Jerry are coming to take you shopping for a new suit. You're not wearing that old stuff. And forget your truck. A limo will pick you up. This non-date is going to cost you, but you're rich. You're welcome." Greg and Jerry walked in just as she finished, and everyone laughed, except me. "Let's get you a suit that's actually from this decade," they said. I sat in the limo, feeling like a nervous teenager on a first date. When I got to Amy's house, I admired her well-kept yard. Neat, attractive, and beautiful, just like her. When she opened the door, I was speechless. She wore a perfect little black dress, conservative yet sexy, knee-length, and perfectly fitted to her curves. Her hair was styled in an elegant semi-bun, understated but alluring. She let me squirm for a moment before saying, "For God's sake, Zach, say something." I blurted out, "You're so beautiful." She blushed and giggled. "Thank you. Glad to know your daughters-in-law's efforts weren't wasted. I feel like a princess." I smiled. "They're getting upgraded in the will, and I mean it. You're beautiful. Come, princess. Your carriage awaits." She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, took my arm, and we headed out. We went to a new Thai restaurant. Amy loved spicy food, but I couldn't handle it as well. She ordered both spicy and mild dishes, feeding me small bites while I wiped my brow. Afterward, we walked to the venue on the warm evening, and I got used to the feel of her hand on my arm. The performance was excellent, and we had some of the best seats in the house. She held my hand the entire time. Afterward, she said, "Thank you so much for tonight. I loved it." "Me too. Too bad it's over," I replied. She stopped. "Over? Who said that? I'm keeping you up past your bedtime, and if you're lucky, I might tuck you in." I blushed, and she laughed. We went to a club that catered to our age group, with a Beatles tribute band playing. She excused herself, and when she returned, her hair was down for the first time, long and beautiful. We sipped drinks and enjoyed the music. She was itching to dance, so I asked, "Wanna?" and she dragged me onto the floor. I wasn't great at dancing, but the slow dances made up for it. She pressed close to me, and we took breaks for me to catch my breath. At one point, her friends Jerry and Sky stopped by. Sky's ankle hurt, so I asked Jerry to dance with Amy. She looked at me, and I nodded, watching her dance happily. After a few fast songs, they returned when a slow one began. "Thank you," she said. "Most men would be jealous," I smiled. "They're your friends, and I want you to have fun. But if it were a stranger, I'd expect you to say no. If you're with me, you're with me." She giggled. "I'm with you, honey." We had coffee with them afterward, and they gave us a card for their dance studio. Before we left, we signed up for lessons. In the limo, I told her, "You don't need lessons. I used to teach part-time. It'll be fun, and dancing with the same partner makes you better. Plus, it'll get you in shape, better than bowling," she said with a smile. I didn't mess things up by trying to come in after walking Amy to her door. I did get a few nice kisses, which was enough for now. On Sunday, before Rosalind arrived, the girls teased me, and the guys asked if I'd scored, while their wives playfully scolded them. When Rosalind arrived and saw the smiles, she asked, "What's everyone so happy about?" Jerry grinned and said, "Pop went on his first date in over 2 years and had a great time." It wasn't entirely true, but no one corrected him. Rosalind didn't seem amused, which dampened the mood until Ashley, their 2-year-old, woke up and lightened the atmosphere. Rosalind noticed Ashley's raccoon toy and commented, "How cute! It looks familiar." Jerry explained, "It's from our company. We make them near the shirt factory and sell them online and in select stores. We've sold quite a few." Rosalind rolled her eyes. "Great, more money for you." Jerry, clearly offended, explained, "Actually, it's a non-profit foundation. Every dollar after cost goes to the Wounded Warrior Foundation to help disabled veterans with things like ramps, guide dogs, and housing modifications." I wished he hadn't mentioned it. We didn't do it for the recognition. It all started when Jerry's best friend, who lost both legs in Afghanistan, needed help. We built ramps for his house, and it led to the idea of creating the foundation. Gail insisted we keep it separate from the business so it wouldn't affect her earnings. Bob, Jerry's friend, now works for us and oversees donations. Rosalind apologized, and the rest of the afternoon went smoothly. On Monday, I received an email outlining the events I'd be attending to represent the company. Fridays and Saturdays would be busy for a while. I was still working half days and considering making it permanent. Amy joined me and Mavis for lunch, but didn't bring up the weekend. She asked if I'd seen the memo about more community involvement, which I had. When Amy kissed me goodbye and called me honey, Mavis's eyes widened, and she immediately pounced. "So, you and Amy? About time. She loves you, you know." I raised my hands. "We're just friends. No one's talking marriage." Mavis gave me a look. "Uh-huh. Well, when that wedding happens, I'll be sitting on the groom's side." Later, Mavis hinted that she and the girls were working on something but wouldn't tell me what. On Friday, she made sure Amy was with me for lunch, and I knew something was up. After lunch, Mavis invited me to the shop, where the girls were grinning. "You told us to experiment, so we did," Mavis said. "Get ready for a fashion show." The fashion show was mostly grandchildren, ranging from 8 months to 6 years, all wearing clothes with our logo. I'd thought about a children's line before, but never had time to develop it. Mavis knocked me to it, and I was impressed. The designs were clever, like a jumper on the 8-month-old with a raccoon in diapers and a dress on a 6-year-old featuring a mother raccoon with her babies. Debbie's daughter Ashley wore red overalls with raccoon heads on the bib. We introduced the Baby Raccoon line online, and it sold out in 2 weeks. Everyone loved it, except Gail, who stormed into my house while Amy and I were having lunch, furious. "You a-hole, I'm the designer," she yelled. We were stunned. I tried to reason with her. "No one's undermining you. I asked about a kids' line 2 years ago and you focused on jeans. Now feel free to design as much as you want." She ranted some more and left. Amy sighed. She's losing it. Her husband's spending money they don't have, and she can't say no. He knows she has millions, but doesn't understand the difference between working millions and spending millions. Worse, he talked her out of a prenup. I was shocked. There's a clause in our agreement that requires a prenup to protect the business. What was she thinking? Meanwhile, things between Amy and me progressed nicely. We attended concerts, plays, and sporting events, including races. Will was winning consistently and had a shot at Rookie of the Year in NASCAR. We expanded our monogramming and shirt factories to keep up with demand, and Forbes featured us on the cover as a true American success story. As Amy and I grew closer, Gail's marriage began to deteriorate. I could sense trouble coming. We attended the annual picnic at the shirt factory. The food was great, and the employees, mostly women, competed fiercely in the dessert contest. Prizes ranged from $50 to $250, and the winner was a coconut cake. The local mayor and county commissioners judged the contest, and the event made the local papers, along with a few photos of Amy and me goofing around. One photo showed me smearing cake on her face, and another caught her kissing me in revenge. The caption identified us as the company's owner and his wife, which the kids found amusing. At the hotel afterward, I was surprised when the clerk gave Amy and me key cards to the same room. Before I could protest, she hurried me along. I got tired of waiting. If I left it to you, we'd be in walkers before anything happened. Now don't screw this up. It had been a long, dry spell, and Amy made up for lost time that night. I managed 2 performances and a third at 6 a.m. The dance lessons had definitely helped. Amy outshone both my ex-wives in every way, throwing herself completely into our time together. At 50, Amy was still trim and beautiful. She made me wait in the living room while she changed, and when she finally emerged, she was wearing a sheer teddy robe and high heels. She twirled, teasing me. "Do you like this?" she asked. Once I regained my speech, I said, "You're beautiful, but it would look even better off you." She giggled. "Then it's only fair you take it off." We made love again, and afterward, I held her until she fell asleep. The next morning, we showered together and made it to breakfast with the family. Debbie teased Amy, saying she was glowing, while Greg joked that I looked like I didn't get enough sleep. They all laughed, but I surprised them by announcing we were staying a few more days. I wanted to visit the toy factory and spend more time with Amy. Mission accomplished. On the flight home, I asked, "How long until you move in?" Amy smiled, taking my hand. "I plan to spend a lot of time in your bed, but I'm not moving in right away. We need to make sure everything's right. And just so you know, I'm an old-fashioned marriage kind of woman." "Does that scare you?" I replied. "The only thing that scares me is not being the one you want." She held my hand for the rest of the flight. The first night home without her was rough. I kept waking up, reaching for her. The next day, we struggled through lunch with Mavis, who quickly caught on. Later, Amy promised to bring a suitcase over, just in case. She decided to stay more often. A week later, Rosalind unexpectedly showed up at my office. She wanted to talk, but I told her to get to the point. After some fidgeting, she finally began reminiscing about our past and asked if we could start over. I cut her off, reminding her of her affair, the hurtful things she said, and how she tried to screw me over in the divorce. I told her that too much had happened and that we couldn't go back. I advised her to be grateful for what she had. Before I could say more, Amy walked in and coolly acknowledged Rosalind. "Lunchtime, honey. Should we have Mexican delivered to the house later so we can relax?" Rosalind sat speechless, and I couldn't help but enjoy it. Taking Amy's hand, I said, "Roz and I were just talking about old times, but I'll save the rest for another day. See you Sunday." We left before Rosalind could react. At lunch, Amy noticed the look on my face. "What's on your mind?" "Everyone knows we're together. I knew she was in your office as soon as your door closed. She needs to learn. I don't share. If she thinks otherwise, she needs to find a new playground. I protect what's mine." I grinned. "So, I'm yours?" Her expression softened. "Yes, you've been mine since the hospital when I realized I was falling for you. Can you handle that?" "I'm out of my league, but I'll spend as long as it takes to make you happy." She ran to the restroom in tears, but her kiss when she returned told me I hadn't messed up. I started looking for a ring while she talked about redecorating. I told her anything was fine as long as she left my office alone. We were both happy. 2 weeks later, while I was browsing honeymoon brochures, my secretary called. "There's a woman here who says she's your wife." I was confused. Everyone knew Rosalind by now, and Amy hadn't said yes yet. I thought it was a joke until Kathy walked in. "Hi, Zach. Surprised?" she asked, dressed to impress. "More like disappointed. Why are you here?" Her smile faded. "I wanted to apologize. Remember my letter?" "I never read past the first line." "Why?" she asked, trying to stay composed. "Because I was in too much pain. I loved you for 6 years, but then I found out you'd been sleeping with clients for commissions. That's what some people call being paid for sex." She struggled to control her temper. "What do you want, Kathy?" She admitted she was broke, having sold her house to keep her business afloat, but it failed anyway. Rumors about her spread, and she lost clients. Now she had no money left and asked for help. Part of me felt some satisfaction, but another part felt pity. I wrote her a check. "This is for the good years we had, but you need to leave town. I'm proposing to my girlfriend today, and I love her more than I thought possible. I'll try to remember our good times." Her eyes widened at the check, but I cut her off when she tried to thank me. "Just take it. I wouldn't be here if you hadn't betrayed me. Your actions pushed me to find success." She asked for a goodbye hug, but I refused. "No, don't ask why. You won't like the answer." Just then, Amy walked in. "Hi, honey, I just need—" She saw Kathy. "Sorry, I'll come back." I took her hand. No need to wait. Miss Myers was just leaving. I guided Amy out of the room, leaving Kathy behind for good. As soon as we turned the corner, Amy pulled me against the wall, kissing me passionately. "I know who she is," she said. I started to explain, but she put her hand on my lips. "No need. I can be jealous and you're mine." "No more ex-wives I don't know about?" I shook my head. "No." "Good. I trust you, but you're too soft-hearted. It's a good thing I'm here to keep you in line. Now, don't you have something to ask me?" It didn't go exactly as I'd imagined, but I got down on one knee and took out the ring from my pocket. People were passing by, secretaries and assistants heading to lunch, floor managers carrying paperwork. They all stopped and stared. "As you said, I'd be lost without you. I think I need a little more supervision, and the only way to get that is by having you with me forever. Amy, love of my life. It took me 2 tries, but I believe I found the woman I was meant to be with. Please, baby, marry me." It wasn't the romantic speech I had hoped for, but I got my point across. I think everyone in the hall was holding their breath as she knelt to my level. "Yes," she said. Plain, simple, and exactly the word I wanted to hear more than anything in my life. People clapped and cheered, but neither of us noticed. We stayed on the floor, kissing for nearly 5 minutes, long enough for the kids to come running down the hall. Maria and Debbie pulled Amy up, and the 3 of them hugged, dancing in a circle. The boys just stood there, grinning. "Stop smirking and help an old man up," I told them. They pulled me to my feet, and the girls grabbed me while Amy hugged Jerry and Greg. Within 40 minutes, the news had spread across both plants. An hour later, Mavis called. "Remember, I sit on your side of the church," she reminded me. I wished I could have seen her face. "You won't be sitting much. Since my parents have passed, you'll be the mother of the groom." She couldn't speak, so she hung up. The date was set, and Amy had moved into my house full-time. We had a long talk about the future. "I think I'm going to retire. The boys are doing well, and Ralph will still be around to guide them. I'll stay on as CEO, but only step in if they hit a deadlock or need advice." "If you retire, I retire," she said. "All right." "Please, honey," she teased. "Like I'm going to let you wander around alone. My new full-time job will be keeping an eye on you." Everyone was thrilled about the engagement, except Gail. She hadn't been happy about much lately. She finally put an end to her husband's reckless spending and told him to get a job if he wanted extra money. He had quit working the day after they got married. He exploded in anger, withdrew as much as he could from their accounts, and left. Then he sued for divorce, asking for alimony and half of her share of the company. Barry did his job. He brought up the partnership and corporation papers that clearly excluded the business from being community property. It was a gray area, but Barry made it clear he could drag things out for years, and her husband would be paying his own fees unless a lawyer took the case on contingency. Barry had a solid reputation, and most lawyers were hesitant. In the end, Gail had to pay him $1.5 million to make him go away. Gail came out to our house for lunch with Amy and me. She looked exhausted and frustrated. "I want out of the company," she said bluntly. "I want to take the jean business and the brand. You can have the rest. Can we work something out?" That night, Amy and I discussed it. She said it wasn't her decision, but I reminded her that we were going to be life partners, and every choice from now on would affect both of us. We consulted Barry, who brought in an independent firm to appraise the business. In the end, we split it the way Gail proposed. She took the jean company and kept the Lardic brand. I had to pay her $2 million in cash to buy out her remaining equity. Amy tried to convince Gail to stay, but Gail was determined. I've learned a lot. It's time for me to move on and follow my own vision. After the paperwork was signed, Gail closed the factory and moved her business to China, leaving the locals devastated. I was furious, but there was nothing I could do. What I could do, however, was buy the equipment and restart under a new brand. Amy came up with our new logo, Livin' Large, featuring 2 big red L's on the pocket. We updated our website, sent out memos, and posted on YouTube to explain the change without bad-mouthing Gail, though people figured it out. Gail thrived for 3 years before selling her company to a Chinese syndicate and opening a design house in LA. Meanwhile, innovation thrived in our company, and Maria came up with a new idea, working with Mavis on the Punk Raccoon line. Instead of the familiar cute logo, the raccoon had black bat-like wings and red eyes with skeletal outlines. We launched hoodies and tees using kids from the community to spread the word. Amy and I eventually married, and I met her son, who had just graduated from college. We brought him into the business, with Greg and Jerry helping him along. Rosalind remarried and moved away, which, while unspoken, brought relief to the boys. Sunday dinners have become big family gatherings. Amy and I are mostly retired, attending only a monthly board meeting. Our honeymoon was a world cruise, and we loved it so much that it's now an annual tradition, taking the grandkids along to give the parents a break. Life has been good. As for Mavis, she retired for 6 months, then called me one day. "Do you know who Ozzy Osbourne is?" she asked. "Yes, Mavis." Good, because I'm quoting him. Retirement sucks. "When can I come back?" I laughed and told her, "As soon as you can walk through the door." She's still going strong.
Hey, welcome back to Cheating Tales Lab. We've got a brand new story lined up for you today, and we're thrilled to have you here. We hope you enjoy it. Let's get started. Alfred Farrell stood at the kitchen sink, his weathered 40-year-old hands methodically washing dishes. 15 years as a postal worker had given him an appreciation for routine, but lately, something fell off. His wife Hope's sudden obsession with her appearance hadn't gone unnoticed. New clothes, a different hairstyle, hours spent primping in front of the mirror. At first, Alfred had been flattered, thinking perhaps she was making an effort for him. But as the weeks wore on, a gnawing suspicion took root in his gut. The sound of Hope's muffled giggles drifted from the living room, grating on his nerves like sandpaper. He dried his hands and padded quietly towards the source of the sound. Hope was sprawled on the couch, phone pressed to her ear, a secretive smile playing on her lips. As he entered, she startled, sitting up abruptly. "Oh, I've got to go," she said hurriedly into the phone. "Talk to you later, Beth." Alfred raised an eyebrow. "Beth from your book club?" Hope nodded, a touch too enthusiastically. "Yes, we were just discussing our latest read. You know how we get carried away." He did know. He also knew that Hope's book club met on Tuesdays, and it was Curly Thursday, but he said nothing, merely grunting in acknowledgement before retreating to the laundry room. As he sorted through the clothes, his hand brushed against Hope's purse. A slip of paper fell out, a receipt. Alfred's eyes widened as he read the itemized list. La Perla, $300 for a scrap of lace he'd never seen. The gnawing in his gut intensified. That night, after Hope had fallen asleep, Alfred lay awake, his mind racing. He thought about the 15 years they'd been married, the routines they'd settled into, the comfortable silences that had once felt like home but now seemed to stretch between them like a chasm. He made a decision. The next day, while Hope was at work, Alfred installed a discreet GPS tracker on her car. It was a simple device, easily hidden beneath the passenger seat. As he activated it, a wave of guilt washed over him. This wasn't who he was. He'd been a Boy Scout for Christ's sake. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. But desperate times called for desperate measures. Over the next week, Alfred watched as the little blinking that represented Hope's car made frequent trips to the Sunset Motel across town. Each time, his heart sank a little lower. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He called in sick to work, something he hadn't done in years. His supervisor, Dave, seemed concerned. "You all right, Farrell? You never take time off." "Just a bug." Alfred lied smoothly. "I'll be back tomorrow." Good as new. As soon as Hope left for work, Alfred followed at a discreet distance. His palms were sweaty on the steering wheel as he watched her pull into the Sunset Motel parking lot. He parked across the street, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure everyone could hear it. And then he saw him, Justin Hendricks, the popular local radio DJ and Hope's co-worker. Alfred had met him once at a company picnic. Charming, funny, with a voice like melted chocolate. Everything Alfred wasn't, he watched, feeling like he was having an out-of-body experience, as Hope practically ran into Justin's arms. Their lips met in a passionate kiss that made Alfred's stomach turn. With shaking hands, he raised his phone and snapped a few photos. Evidence. That's what he needed now. As he lowered the phone, his eyes met Justin's across the parking lot. For a split second, recognition flashed in the other man's eyes. Then Hope pulled him into the motel room, and the door slammed shut. Alfred sat in his car for a long time after that, staring at nothing. He felt hollow-gutted. But beneath the pain, something else was stirring. A cold, calculating anger that surprised him with its intensity. His mind was already formulating a plan. Over the next few weeks, Alfred maintained a convincing facade of normalcy at home. He smiled at Hope over breakfast, asked about her day, and even surprised her with flowers one evening. All the while, he was meticulously gathering evidence. His first stop was the Sunset Motel. Sam, the owner, was a chatty man in his 60s who seemed flattered by Alfred's attention. Alfred spun a tale about writing a novel about small-town life, and Sam was more than happy to regale him with stories about the motel's colorful history. "You must see all sorts here," Alfred said casually one afternoon, leaning against the front desk. Sam chuckled. "Oh, you wouldn't believe the half of it. Affairs, mostly. People thinking they're being so clever, but it's always the same story." Alfred's hand tightened on the edge of the desk. "I bet you have some security measures in place, though, for insurance purposes, if nothing else." Sam nodded towards a camera in the corner of the lobby. "Just the one there. Records everything that happens in this lobby." Alfred's eyes gleamed. "Fascinating. Mind if I take a look at how it's set up? For the book, you know." Sam hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. "Why not? Come on back." In the small office behind the front desk, Sam showed Alfred the ancient computer that served as a motel security system. It didn't take much for Alfred to convince Sam to let him study it for his novel. Once alone, Alfred's fingers flew over the keyboard. He may have been a postal worker, but he'd picked up some IT skills during his stint in the military. Within minutes, he had access to months of security footage. He found what he was looking for almost immediately: Hope and Justin entering and leaving the motel at regular intervals. Sometimes they looked furtive, glancing around nervously. Other times they were so wrapped up in each other they might as well have been alone in the world. Alfred copied the relevant footage onto a flash drive, his face impassive. When Sam returned, Alfred was leaning back in the chair, a pleasant smile on his face. "Find what you needed?" Sam asked. Alfred nodded. "Oh, yes. Very enlightening. Thank you, Sam." Back at home, Alfred turned his attention to Hope's email. She'd always been careless with her passwords, using the same one for everything, their anniversary date. The irony wasn't lost on Alfred, as he easily gained access to her account. What he found made his blood run cold. Months of intimate exchanges between Hope and Justin, plans for their rendezvous, declarations of passion, and worst of all, lies about working overtime at the radio station to meet Justin. Alfred read every single email, saving copies to an external hard drive. By the time he was done, it was well past midnight. He heard Hope stirring upstairs and quickly shut down the computer. As he climbed into bed beside her, Hope mumbled sleepily, "Everything okay? You were up late." Alfred forced a smile. "Just catching up on some work." "Go back to sleep, honey." Hope snuggled closer to him, and Alfred lay rigid, staring at the ceiling. He thought about the vows they'd made, the life they'd built together, all of it based on a foundation of lies. In that moment, something inside Alfred hardened. The pain was still there, a dull ache in his chest, but it was overshadowed by a cold, calculating anger. He reached for the bedside table, pulling out a small notebook. In the dim light of the alarm clock, he began to write. Every detail of Hope's betrayal, every piece of evidence he'd gathered, it would become his journal, a record of his emotional journey. And though he didn't know it yet, it would become crucial to his plan. The next morning, Alfred called his supervisor at the post office. "Dave, it's Alfred. I need to take a week off. Family emergency out of state." Dave sounded concerned. "Everything all right, Farrell? This isn't like you." Alfred forced a note of worry into his voice. "My sister's in the hospital. Nothing too serious. But I need to be there. You understand, right?" Of course. Take all the time you need." With that taken care of, Alfred set his plan in motion. His first stop was a small, cash-only apartment across town. The landlord didn't ask questions when Alfred handed over 3 months' rent in cash, using the name Nick Buford. Next, he visited a graphic designer in the next town over. The young woman looked skeptical when Alfred explained what he wanted. A life-size promotional poster for a surprise anniversary party. Alfred nodded, his face a mask of enthusiasm. "My wife's always wanted to be a movie star. I thought it would be fun to make her the star of her own movie poster." He handed over the photos he'd taken of Hope and Justin outside the motel. The designer's eyebrows rose, but she took the job, agreeing to create a life-size design. Back in town, Alfred made a stop at the home of Marissa, a mutual friend of his and Hope's. She was delighted to see him. "Alfred, what a nice surprise. Come in." Over coffee, Alfred spun a tale about planning surprise parties for both Hope and Justin. "I was hoping you might have spare keys to their houses," he said casually. "You know, for decorating and such." Marissa hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "Oh, why not? It's for a good cause, after all." As he left Marissa's house, keys to both Hope and Justin's homes in hand, Alfred felt a twinge of guilt. He'd never been a good liar before, but he was learning fast. That evening, as Hope chatted about her day over dinner, Alfred nodded and smiled in all the right places. But his mind was elsewhere, running through the logistics of his plan. He had learned that morning that there were budget cuts coming at work. His job might be on the line. It added a sense of urgency to his actions. After dinner, while Hope was engrossed in her favorite TV show, Alfred slipped down to the basement. He powered up his computer and began researching divorce laws. Property division, alimony, grounds for divorce. He took meticulous notes. Then he turned his attention to his personal assets, investments, savings accounts, their joint checking account. He began the process of liquidating what he could, moving money around in a complex shell game. As he worked, Alfred felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. For the first time in weeks, he felt in control. Hope might have betrayed him, but he would have the last laugh. He glanced at the clock. It was well past midnight. He could hear Hope moving around upstairs, probably wondering where he was. For a moment, he considered going up, playing the role of devoted husband one more time. Instead, he turned back to his computer. He had work to do, preparing for all contingencies. The night air was thick with anticipation as Alfred Farrell crouched in the shadows outside the WKRP radio station. His heart hammered against his ribs, a steady rhythm that matched the ticking of his watch. 11:45 p.m. 15 minutes until the cleaning crew's shift change. 15 minutes until he set his plan in motion. He adjusted the backpack slung over his shoulder, feeling the weight of the rolled-up poster inside. The life-size image of Hope and Justin, caught in a passionate embrace outside the Sunset Motel, felt like a bomb waiting to detonate. And Alfred was about to light the fuse. As the last of the cleaning staff trickled out of the building, Alfred made his move. He slipped inside, his footsteps echoing in the empty lobby. The security guard was doing his rounds on the upper floors. Alfred had memorized the schedule over the past week. He had exactly 7 minutes before the guard returned. With practiced efficiency, Alfred unrolled the poster and began hanging it in the center of the main lobby. His hand shook slightly as he smoothed out the creases, revealing the damning image inch by inch. Hope's face, frozen in ecstasy. Justin's hands, possessive and hungry. It was obscene. It was perfect. Stepping back, Alfred surveyed his handiwork. The poster dominated the space, impossible to miss. But something was missing. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a can of red spray paint. In bold, dripping letters, he wrote beneath the image, "We know what you did." The words seemed to pulse in the dim light, accusing and final. Alfred allowed himself a grim smile. Let them try to explain this away. With 2 minutes to spare, he retreated to a hidden alcove and pulled out his laptop. His fingers flew over the keys as he hacked into the station's email server. One by one, messages pinged out to every employee, from the lowliest intern to the station manager himself. The subject line read, "New art installation in the lobby, don't miss it." As he heard the elevator ding, signaling the guard's return, Alfred slipped out a side exit. The cool night air hit his face, and he took a deep breath. Phase 1 complete. He drove to the hotel he'd booked near his fictional sister's house, his alibi secured. As he checked in, he made a show of looking haggard and worried, playing the part of the concerned brother to perfection. "Room service, please," he told the sympathetic desk clerk. "I've been on the road all day visiting my sick sister. I am exhausted." Once in his room, Alfred set up his laptop and connected to the station's security cameras. He'd planted a back door in their system weeks ago, and now it gave him a front-row seat to the chaos that was about to unfold. He settled back against the headboard, a glass of whiskey in hand. On the screen, the night guard was making his final rounds. Any minute now, he would turn the corner and come face to face with Alfred's handiwork. Alfred raised his glass in a silent toast. "Showtime," he murmured. Hope Farrell hummed to herself as she applied her lipstick, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to break over her head. She'd woken up to an empty bed, Alfred having left early for work, or so she thought. Her phone buzzed with a text from Justin. "Can't wait to see you at the charity event tonight. You're going to knock them dead in that new dress." Hope smiled, a mixture of excitement and guilt twisting in her stomach. She pushed the guilt aside, as she had been doing for months now. Alfred would never know. He was too trusting, too caught up in his own routine to notice what was happening right under his nose. As she left the house, Hope never noticed the figure watching from across the street. Alfred waited until her car had turned the corner before making his move. He entered the house, their house, with the spare key he'd never returned. For a moment, he stood in the entryway, memories washing over him. Their first night here, carrying Hope over the threshold. Christmases, birthdays, lazy Sunday mornings, all tainted now. Alfred shook off the nostalgia and got to work. He moved through the rooms like a whirlwind, methodically creating chaos. He overturned drawers, scattered papers, smashed picture frames. But it wasn't random destruction. No! Every move was calculated. He focused on Hope's belongings and their shared spaces, leaving his own things largely untouched. A message hidden in the mayhem. This was about her, not him. As he worked, Alfred planted tiny cameras throughout the house. In the bedroom, the kitchen, the living room. Each one carefully hidden, ready to capture Hope's reaction when she returned home. In the study, Alfred paused. He pulled out a sheet of paper and began to write. The words flowed easily, all the pain and betrayal of the past months pouring onto the page. When he was done, he read it over. Hope, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I know about Justin. I know about the Sunset Motel. I know about the lies, the deceit, the betrayal. Every moment, every touch, every whispered promise. I know it all. Did you think I was too stupid to notice? Too blind to see what was happening right in front of me? I may be just a simple postal worker, but I'm not a fool. I've taken what's mine. Don't bother looking for me. Don't bother trying to explain. There's nothing left to say. Goodbye. Hope. I hope it was worth it. Alfred. He folded the letter and placed it on Hope's pillow, a landmine waiting to be triggered. Before leaving, Alfred gathered up the important documents he'd need: birth certificate, social security card, bank statements. He also took a few sentimental items. His grandfather's watch, the baseball signed by his childhood hero, the photo album from their honeymoon. Let Hope wonder why these specific things were missing. As a final touch, Alfred picked up the phone and dialed 911. When the operator answered, he disguised his voice, pitching it higher and adding a tremor of fear. Please, you have to help. I just saw someone breaking into the house across the street. 1242 Maple Drive. They're still inside. He hung up before the operator could ask any questions. The police would arrive soon, adding another layer of chaos to Hope's homecoming. Alfred took one last look around the house that had been his home for 15 years. Then he walked out the door, leaving behind the wreckage of his old life. Alfred sat in the sterile environment of his local bank, his face a mask of calm as he systematically dismantled his financial life. The teller, a young woman with concerned eyes, watched as he closed account after account. Are you sure about this, Mr. Farrell? She asked, her voice tinged with worry. That's a significant amount of money to transfer offshore. Alfred nodded, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Quite sure. Thank you. I'm making some lifestyle changes. As the last of his and Hope's joint accounts was drained, Alfred felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He'd spent weeks researching offshore banking, setting up a labyrinth of transfers that would be nearly impossible to trace. Hope wouldn't see a penny of it. Next stop, the credit card companies. One by one, Alfred canceled every card they shared. He could almost hear the distant sound of Hope's wallet becoming worthless. Sitting in his car outside the bank, Alfred pulled out his phone. He stared at the screen for a long moment before composing an email to his boss at the post office. Dear Dave, I regret to inform you that I must resign from my position, effective immediately. Personal circumstances have arisen that require my full attention. I apologize for the short notice and any inconvenience this may cause. Thank you for your understanding. Sincerely, Alfred Herold. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. 15 years of service ended with a few taps on a screen, but it was necessary. He couldn't risk anyone at work connecting him to what was about to unfold at the radio station. Alfred's next task was perhaps the cruelest, but he felt no remorse as he sealed the envelope. Inside was a comprehensive dossier of Hope and Justin's affair, hotel receipts, email printouts, photos from the motel. On the front, in clear block letters, he'd written, Mrs. Faith Hendricks. He dropped the package in a mailbox across town, imagining the bomb it would detonate in Justin's home. Let him feel the sting of betrayal, too. As the sun began to set, Alfred drove to the long-term parking lot at the airport. He pulled into a spot near the back, away from the security cameras. From his trunk, he retrieved a suitcase he'd packed for this very purpose. He placed the suitcase on the passenger seat, making sure it was clearly visible. On top, he left a printed itinerary for a one-way flight to Bangkok, departing in 2 days. Let them chase shadows halfway around the world. His final stop was the small apartment he'd rented under the name Nick Buford. It was sparsely furnished, but it had everything he needed: a bed, a desk, and most importantly, a top-of-the-line computer setup. Alfred settled into the chair, powering up the multiple monitors. On one screen, he pulled up the feed from the hidden cameras in his and Hope's house. Another showed the security footage from the radio station. A third displayed local news sites, ready to catch any breaking stories. He leaned back, a tumbler of whiskey in hand. The pieces were all in place. Now, he just had to watch it all burn. As night fell, Alfred Farrell disappeared, and Nick Buford, a man with no past and an uncertain future, began his vigil. Hope Farrell's heels clicked against the polished floor of the WKRP radio station lobby, the sound echoing in the early morning quiet. She was running late for the charity event planning meeting, her mind still fuzzy from a night of stolen moments with Justin. As she rounded the corner, her steps faltered, then stopped completely. There, dominating the lobby wall, was a life-size poster of her and Justin locked in a passionate embrace outside the Sunset Motel. Hope's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Beneath the damning image, blood-red letters screamed, "We know what you did." "Oh my God," she whispered, her perfectly manicured hand flying to her mouth. Around her, the lobby began to fill with arriving employees. Gasps and whispers erupted as each person caught sight of the poster. Hope stood frozen, feeling dozens of eyes boring into her. "Hope, what's going on? Why is everyone—" Justin's voice cut off abruptly as he entered the lobby. His face, usually so confident and charming, drained of all color. Their eyes met across the room, panic and shame mirrored in each other's gaze. In that moment, Hope knew their carefully constructed house of lies was crumbling around them. "Farrell, Hendricks, my office now." The station manager's voice boomed through the lobby, cutting through the growing murmurs. Hope and Justin followed him in silence, feeling like condemned prisoners walking to the gallows. As the office door closed behind them, shutting out the chaos of the lobby, Hope felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. "Would either of you care to explain what the hell is going on out there?" The manager's face was purple with rage, a vein throbbing in his forehead. Hope opened her mouth, but no words came out. What could she possibly say? Justin, ever the smooth talker, tried to salvage the situation. "Sir, I can assure you, this is all just a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" The manager slammed his fist on the desk. "There's a billboard-sized photo of you two going at it like rabbits in my lobby. Do you have any idea what this could do to the station? To our reputation?" Hope sank into a chair, her legs no longer able to support her. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a nightmare. "You're both suspended, effective immediately, pending a full investigation," the manager continued. "Now get out of my sight before I do something I'll regret." As they left the office, Hope's phone buzzed with a text from Alfred. "Hope, something's happened at the house. You need to come home now." Hope's heart, already racing, kicked into overdrive. What else could possibly go wrong? She raced home, her mind a whirl of panic and confusion. As she pulled into the driveway, she saw police cars parked outside. Her hands shook as she fumbled with her keys. The moment she stepped inside, Hope's world tilted on its axis. The house was in shambles, drawers upended, pictures smashed. It looked like a tornado had torn through their once peaceful home. "Mrs. Farrell?" A police officer approached her. "We received a call about a break-in at this address. Can you tell us if anything's missing?" Hope stumbled through the house in a daze, barely registering the officer's words. When she reached the bedroom, she saw it, a letter, placed neatly on her pillow amidst the chaos. With trembling hands, she unfolded the paper and began to read. Alfred's words, cold and cutting, laid bare every secret, every lie. He knew. He had always known. Hope's legs gave out, and she collapsed to the floor, the letter clutched to her chest. As the reality of what she'd lost crashed over her, Hope began to sob, great heaving cries that shook her entire body. The police officers exchanged uncomfortable glances, their suspicions growing with each passing moment. Across town, Faith Hendricks stared at the package that had just arrived, its contents spread across her kitchen table. Photos, emails, hotel receipts, irrefutable evidence of her husband's infidelity. With a calm she didn't feel, Faith walked to the front door and changed the locks. Then she called her lawyer. When Justin arrived home that evening, he found divorce papers waiting for him on the porch. And in a small, nondescript apartment, Alfred Farrell, now Nick Buford, watched it all unfold on his bank of monitors, a tumbler of whiskey in hand. He observed the chaos he had orchestrated with a mixture of grim satisfaction and a deep, aching sadness. "Cheers, Hope," he murmured, raising his glass to the screen. "I hope it was worth it." Hope Farrell stood in the checkout line at the local grocery store, her cart filled with the bare necessities. Her hand shook slightly as she reached for her wallet, knowing what was coming but praying for a miracle nonetheless. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the cashier said, a hint of pity in her eyes. "Your card's been declined." Hope felt the stares of the people in line behind her, heard their impatient sighs. Her cheeks burned with humiliation as she fumbled for another card, then another, each one useless, canceled by Alfred in his meticulous destruction of their shared life. I'll have to come back," she mumbled, abandoning her cart and fleeing the store. In her car, Hope let out a strangled sob. How had it come to this? Just weeks ago, she'd had it all: a loving husband, a good job, financial security. Now it was all gone, evaporated like morning dew under the harsh light of her betrayal. Her phone buzzed. Justin. Hope considered ignoring it, but desperation won out. They needed to find Alfred, to try and salvage something from this wreckage. "Any luck?" she asked, not bothering with pleasantries. Justin's bitter laugh crackled through the speaker. "Oh yeah, tons of luck. All bad. The PI we hired can't find a trace of Alfred. It's like he's vanished into thin air." Hope's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "We have to keep looking. He's got all our money, Justin. I can't even buy groceries. You think I'm doing any better?" Justin snapped. "The station fired me. My wife's divorcing me. I'm sleeping on my buddy's couch. This is all your fault, you know." "My fault?" Hope's voice rose incredulously. "It takes two to have an affair, Justin. You were just as involved as I was." "Yeah, well, it wasn't my husband who went psycho and destroyed our lives, was it?" The call ended abruptly, leaving Hope alone with her thoughts. She drove aimlessly, her mind racing. There had to be a way out of this nightmare. There had to be. Her phone rang again. Hope's heart leapt, hoping it was Justin calling back to apologize. Instead, she saw her mother's number on the screen. "Mom," she answered hesitantly. "Hope Elizabeth Farrell." Her mother's voice was ice cold. "Would you care to explain why I just received an anonymous email detailing your indiscretions?" Hope's blood ran cold. "Mom, I can explain. Save it." Her mother cut her off. "Your father and I are beyond disappointed. We raised you better than this. Until you come to your senses and beg Alfred's forgiveness, don't bother calling us." The line went dead. Hope pulled over to the side of the road, her vision blurring with tears. She was alone, truly, utterly alone. Meanwhile, in his rented apartment, Alfred, or rather, Nick Buford, leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. He'd just hit send on the email to Hope's parents, another nail in the coffin of her former life. He turned his attention back to the monitors, watching Hope break down in her car through the traffic cam he'd hacked. Part of him wanted to reach out, to comfort her. But that part was quickly silenced by the memory of her betrayal. "You made your bed, Hope," he murmured. "Now lie in it." As the weeks turned into months, Hope and Justin's desperate search for Alfred continued to yield nothing. Their relationship, once passionate and exciting, deteriorated into a series of bitter arguments and recriminations. "This is useless," Justin shouted during one particularly heated exchange. "We're never going to find him. And even if we did, what then? You think he's just going to hand over the money and forgive us?" Hope sank onto the worn couch in Justin's friend's apartment, where they'd both been staying. "We have to keep trying," she said, her voice hollow. "What else can we do?" Justin ran a hand through his unkempt hair, his once handsome face haggard with stress. "I don't know, Hope. I just don't know anymore." As they sat in defeated silence, neither of them aware of the hidden camera capturing their every move, transmitting it all back to the man they were so desperately seeking. 6 months after Alfred Farrell's disappearance, a new novel hit the shelves. The Postman Always Knows Twice by M.B. Fowler became an overnight sensation. Critics hailed it as a gripping tale of betrayal and revenge. Readers couldn't put it down, and talk shows clamored to interview the mysterious author. Hope Farrell stood in the local bookstore, staring at the display of novels with a mixture of disbelief and horror. The cover showed a stylized image of a man in a postal uniform, his back turned, walking away from a woman reaching out to him. It was too close to home, too familiar. With shaking hands, she picked up a copy and began to read. Page after page, her own story unfolded before her eyes. The names were changed, certain details altered, but there was no mistaking it. This was her life, her affair, her downfall, laid bare for the world to see. "It can't be," she whispered, drawing curious glances from other shoppers. "It can't be him." But deep down, she knew. Alfred, quiet, unassuming Alfred, had outplayed them all. Across town, Justin Hendricks was having a similar revelation. He'd been channel surfing in his dingy studio apartment when he saw a familiar face on the screen. It was Alfred, looking more confident and put together than Justin had ever seen him. "So, Mr. Fowler," the talk show host was saying, "your novel has struck a chord with readers everywhere. What inspired you to write it?" Alfred, or M.B. Fowler, as he was now known, smiled enigmatically. "Well, Barbara, I think we've all experienced betrayal in some form or another. I wanted to explore what happens when someone decides not to just lie down and take it, but to fight back." Justin fumbled for his phone, dialing Hope's number with trembling fingers. "Are you seeing this?" he hissed when she answered. "It's Alfred. He's written a book about us." "I know," Hope replied, her voice hollow. "I'm holding a copy right now." As Alfred's book tour continued, his star only rose higher. He appeared on more talk shows, gave interviews to major newspapers, even hinted at a possible movie deal. With each appearance, he gained more sympathy as the wrong spouse who had turned his pain into art. Meanwhile, Hope and Justin watched their lives crumble further. They consulted lawyers about suing for defamation, but without hard evidence that the novel was about them, and with Alfred's meticulous changes to protect himself legally, they were advised it would be a losing battle. "He's ruined us," Hope said dully, staring at the cease and desist letter their lawyer had received in response to their inquiries. "Completely and utterly ruined us." Justin, who had been pacing the small office, suddenly whirled on her. "No, Hope, you ruined us. You and your inability to keep your damn mouth shut about our affair. If you hadn't bragged to your friends, if you hadn't been so careless, none of this would have happened." As they descended into yet another argument, neither noticed the small camera hidden in the potted plant in the corner of the lawyer's office, transmitting their distress to a man miles away. Alfred, now comfortably settled in a luxurious apartment paid for by his book success, watched the feed with a mix of satisfaction and unexpected melancholy. He had won. He had his revenge. So, why didn't he feel as triumphant as he'd expected? Shaking off the moment of doubt, Alfred turned his attention to his laptop. He had charitable donations to make, Anonymously, of course. Let the town see how their once-beloved radio personality and his mistress had fallen, while a mysterious benefactor supported local causes. It was the perfect final touch to his plan, the ultimate victory. The courtroom was silent as the judge delivered her verdict. Hope sat rigid in her chair, her once stylish clothes now worn and shabby. Across the aisle, Alfred, looking every inch the successful author in a tailored suit, listened impassively. In the matter of Farrell versus Farrell, the judge began, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Alfred Farrell. Given the evidence presented of Mrs. Farrell's infidelity and Mr. Farrell's significant contributions to the marriage, the division of assets will be as follows. Hope barely heard the rest. It was over. Alfred had won again. The careful documentation of her affair, the financial records showing how he'd supported her through graduate school, the character witnesses attesting to his upstanding nature and her recent erratic behavior. It had all added up to this moment. As the court adjourned, Hope watched Alfred stride confidently out of the room. He didn't even glance in her direction. She was nothing to him now. Less than nothing. Weeks later, Hope sat at her small kitchen table, pen hovering over a blank sheet of paper. She'd lost everything. Her job, her reputation, her family's support. Alfred's book was still topping the bestseller list, a constant reminder of her shame. In desperation, she decided to make one last appeal. Dear Alfred, she wrote, her handwriting shaky. I know I have no right to contact you, no right to ask for anything, but I'm begging you, please. Can we talk? I know what I did was unforgivable, but I never meant to hurt you. I never stopped loving you. Please, Alfred, I have nothing left. No one left. You're my only hope. She sealed the letter with tears in her eyes, clinging to a shred of hope that somewhere, deep down, Alfred still cared. 3 days later, a large manila envelope arrived at Hope's apartment. Her heart leapt. Had Alfred read her letter? Was this a response? But as she tore it open, her hope turned to ashes. Inside was a formal cease and desist order, threatening legal action if she attempted to contact Alfred again. It was signed by his lawyer, not even by Alfred himself. Hope sank to the floor, the papers scattered around her. It was truly, finally over. Across town, Justin Hendricks packed the last of his meager belongings into a battered suitcase. The town that had once adored him now shunned him at every turn. No one would hire him, not even for the most menial jobs. Every stranger's glance felt accusing. Every whispered conversation seemed to be about him. He couldn't take it anymore. With no destination in mind, Justin tossed his suitcase into his car, the one possession he'd managed to keep, and drove away from the town that had been his home for so long. He didn't look back. Meanwhile, Alfred Farrell stood in the local animal shelter, surrounded by the barks and meows of abandoned pets. He'd started volunteering here a few weeks ago, finding an unexpected solace in caring for these forgotten creatures. As he walked down the row of kennels, a pair of soulful brown eyes caught his attention. A mixed-breed dog, probably part lab, part who knows what, watched him cautiously. The sign on the kennel read Max, 3 years old. Abandoned. Something in the dog's wary gaze struck a chord in Alfred. Here was another being who had been betrayed, left behind by those who should have cared for him. Hey there, Max, Alfred said softly, crouching down. How about we start over together? Max's tail gave a tentative wag, and as Alfred filled out the adoption papers, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. A flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could learn to trust again, to love again. It wouldn't be easy. The pain of Hope's betrayal still lingered, a dull ache in his chest. But as he clipped a leash onto Max's collar and led him out of the shelter, Alfred felt the first stirrings of a new chapter beginning. Come on, boy, he said, scratching Max behind the ears. Let's go home. As they walked out into the sunlight, Alfred Farrell, author, divorce, and now dog owner, took his first step towards a future unburdened by the weight of betrayal and revenge. Max trotted alongside him, his paws padding softly on the sidewalk. For a moment, Alfred allowed himself to imagine a life filled with simple pleasures. Long walks in the park, quiet evenings by the fireplace, the unconditional love of a loyal companion. But as they reached Alfred's car, a flicker of movement across the street caught his eye. There, half hidden behind a parked van, stood Hope. Her once perfect hair was limp and unkempt, her designer clothes replaced by a shabby sweater and jeans. Their eyes met for a brief, electric moment. Alfred felt a surge of conflicting emotions, anger, pity, a ghost of the love he'd once felt. For a heartbeat, he considered crossing the street, speaking to her, offering what? Forgiveness? A second chance? Max whined softly, drawing Alfred's attention back to the present. He looked down at the dog, then back up at Hope. She took a hesitant step forward, hope blooming in her eyes. Alfred shook his head once, firmly. Then he opened the car door, helped Max inside, and drove away without looking back. As the shelter receded in his rearview mirror, Alfred felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The chapter of his life that included Hope was over. He had exacted his revenge, written his story, and now it was time to move on. He glanced at Max, who was watching the world go by with eager curiosity. "Well, boy," Alfred said, reaching over to scratch behind the dog's ears. "Looks like it's just you and me now. Ready for a new adventure." Max's tail thumped against the seat in response. As they drove home, Alfred's mind wandered to his next book project. Perhaps a lighter tale this time, something about new beginnings and second chances. He had a feeling he'd have plenty of inspiration. The sun was setting as Alfred pulled into his driveway, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn of his new home. A modest but comfortable house bought with the proceeds from his bestseller. As he and Max walked up the path, Alfred felt a sense of peace settle over him. Inside, he unclipped Max's leash and watched as the dog cautiously explored his new surroundings. Alfred moved through the house, turning on lights and shedding the persona of M.B. Fowler, successful author, like an old coat. In his study, he paused before the wall of framed clippings, reviews of his book, photos from his talk show appearances, the New York Times bestseller list with his name at the top, mementos of his triumph, his revenge. For a moment, he considered taking them down. But no, they were part of his story now, a reminder of how far he'd come and what he'd overcome. Max padded into the room, pressing against Alfred's leg. Alfred looked down at the dog, then back at the wall of memories. "You know what, Max?" he said softly. "I think we both deserve a fresh start." He reached out and straightened one of the frames, a small smile playing on his lips. The past couldn't be erased, but it didn't have to define his future. As the night deepened, Alfred settled into his favorite armchair, a notebook open on his lap. Max curled up at his feet, a warm, comforting presence. The house was quiet save for the scratch of pen on paper and the occasional contented sigh from the dog. Alfred wrote late into the night, pouring out ideas for his new novel. But this time, instead of a tale of betrayal and revenge, he found himself writing about redemption, about the healing power of unexpected connections. As he finally set down his pen and prepared for bed, Alfred realized he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: excitement for the future. He had survived the storm of betrayal, navigated the turbulent waters of revenge, and now found himself on the shores of a new beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities. But for now, as he drifted off to sleep with Max, snoring softly beside the bed, Alfred Farrell was content. The story of the betrayed postal worker was over. The story of Alfred Farrell, author and dog owner, was just beginning. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
In the silent, shadowed halls of our home, the laughter of a woman not my own echoed, intertwining with the deep, familiar timbre of Michael's voice. My heart thudded painfully in my chest as I stood, frozen, just steps from the bedroom door. My arms instinctively cradled our newborn daughter, a tiny being oblivious to the storm about to break. Michael, you're choosing to spend time with me. Clearly, I'm far more exciting than Amelia. Plus, I don't do babies. They're just noisy and needy. The woman's voice dripped with contempt. My name, uttered so carelessly, jolted me from my daze. The audacity of this woman, mocking not just me but my child too, ignited a fire in my veins. I pushed the door open, revealing the sordid scene, my husband, Michael, and his mistress, entwined on what used to be our shared bed. The room spun as Michael's eyes met mine, his expression morphing from shock to a cold, calculated calm. Amelia, why are you back already? Weren't you supposed to be discharged tomorrow? I felt a bitter laugh escape my lips. I messaged you, Michael. Or were you too preoccupied to notice? My gaze fell on the woman beside him, her smug smile faltering under my stare. Michael stood, adjusting his shirt. Look, there's no easy way to say this. I want a divorce. I've already filled out my part of the papers. He gestured nonchalantly to a stack of documents on the dresser. A profound silence filled the room, punctuated only by the soft cooing of my daughter in my arms. The walls of the room that once held laughter and love now bore witness to my life's cruel unraveling. I mustered all the strength left in my postpartum body and stood tall. Is this what you really want, Michael? A life without your daughter and me? His gaze was unwavering, cold. Yes, it's for the best. Those words were the final blow, shattering the last vestiges of the life I thought we had. With tears streaming down my face, yet with a heart strangely solidified by resolve, I whispered, "Then this is goodbye, Michael. Forever." I turned away from the ruins of my marriage, my mind racing with plans and possibilities. I had lost the man I loved, but in his place, I found a fierce determination to protect my daughter and reclaim my life. As I stepped out into the cool night air, cradling my daughter close, a new path lay before us. One of resilience, independence, and, above all, a resolve for retribution. The soft glow of the morning sun did little to warm the chill that had settled in my heart. Sitting at the kitchen table in my parents' home, I cradled a steaming cup of coffee, lost in thought. My daughter, nestled in a bassinet beside me, was the only source of light in my newly darkened world. My mother, a pillar of strength with gentle eyes, joined me. "You don't have to go through this alone, Amelia. We're here for you every step of the way." I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. "I know, Mom. It's just, how could he? How could Michael do this to us?" The betrayal stung anew with each passing moment. Michael, whom I had loved unconditionally, had discarded our family like a piece of unwanted furniture. The pain was deep, but beneath it, a fierce determination was taking root. My father, a stern yet caring man, spoke up. "We'll support you, Amelia. Whatever you need, we're here for you." Their unwavering support bolstered my resolve. I had to be strong, not just for my daughter, but for myself too. Michael had taken enough from me. I wouldn't let him take my spirit too. As days turned into weeks, I found a rhythm in my new life. My daughter's gurgles and smiles were my daily respite from the storm that raged within me. I threw myself into work, my career at the multinational firm offering a much-needed distraction. But beneath the surface of this newfound routine, a plan was simmering. Michael had wronged us, and I couldn't let that go unchallenged. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. I began to gather information, sifting through our financial records and scrutinizing Michael's recent behavior. The picture that emerged was one of deceit and manipulation. The more I uncovered, the stronger my resolve grew. Michael wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a man who had taken advantage of my trust and love for his gain. I spent my evenings after putting my daughter to bed, meticulously planning my next steps. With every piece of evidence I gathered, the outline of my strategy became clearer. I would confront Michael, but not as the broken-hearted wife he had left behind. I would face him as a woman empowered by the truth and unafraid to demand justice. As I laid out my plans, a sense of empowerment washed over me. I was no longer the naive girl who had fallen in love with Michael. I was a mother, a survivor, and soon I would be the architect of Michael's undoing. The soft hum of my laptop was the only sound in the room as I scrolled through the report from the private investigator. The pages were a damning testament to Michael's deceit. Photographs of him with various women, credit card statements for extravagant gifts and hotel stays. Each piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin of our marriage, a marriage I now realized was built on lies. I heard a soft knock on the door. My mother peeked in, concern etched on her face. "Amelia, you've been in here for hours. Are you all right?" I looked up, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, Mom, just sorting through some things." She entered, sitting beside me. "You know, it's okay to feel angry, to feel hurt. You don't have to hide it, not from me." I sighed, a weight lifting as I shared the burden of my findings. "It's not just the cheating, Mom. It's everything. The lies, the manipulation. He's not the man I thought I married." My mother's hand found mine, her grip firm and reassuring. "You're strong, Amelia. Stronger than you know. And you have us. We'll get through this together." With my family's support, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The time for mourning what could have been was over. Now, it was time for action. I contacted Michael, my voice steady as I confronted him over the phone. "We need to talk, Michael. About the divorce, the finances, everything." There was a pause before he answered, his voice oozing false concern. "Amelia, I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. Let's meet and sort everything out." The day of our meeting, I walked into the cafe, every step fueled by a cocktail of determination and righteous anger. Michael sat there, the picture of casual arrogance. "Amelia, let's make this quick, okay? I have a busy day ahead," he said, barely glancing up from his phone. I sat down, my documents neatly stacked in front of me. "Let's start with the finances. I've been reviewing our accounts, and there are some discrepancies I'd like to discuss." Michael's eyes flicked to the papers, then back to me, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "Discrepancies? What are you talking about?" I slid the photographs across the table, his secret life laid bare in glossy prints. "This is just the beginning, Michael. I know about the hotels, the gifts, the trips. I know everything." The color drained from his face as he realized the extent of my knowledge. "Amelia, listen. We can work this out. There's no need to make a scene." I leaned in, my voice low but unwavering. "This is not a negotiation, Michael. This is me taking back control. I will not be brushed or silenced. Not anymore." As I detailed my terms for the divorce, including fair financial settlements and custody arrangements, Michael's mask of confidence crumbled. For the first time, I saw him for what he truly was, a coward hiding behind a facade of charm and deceit. I left the cafe with a sense of triumph. The road ahead would be challenging, but I was no longer the victim in this story. I was the author, and this chapter was just the beginning of Michael's reckoning. The morning sun cast long shadows in the living room of my former home, now a battleground for the final confrontation. Michael stood there, his face a mask of faux composure. Beside him his mistress, a picture of uneasy defiance. My parents flanked me, their presence a silent testament to their unwavering support. My father's stern gaze bore into Michael, while my mother held my daughter, a protective shield against the toxic atmosphere. "Amelia, why drag this out? Let's just settle this and move on," Michael started, his voice tinged with irritation. I shook my head, my resolve steeling. "No, Michael. You don't get to dictate how this ends, not after everything you've done." He scoffed, a hollow laugh devoid of humor. "What do you want, then? Money? Is that what this is about?" I stepped forward, my voice steady. "This is about respect, something you clearly know nothing about. It's about acknowledging your actions and their consequences." His mistress piped up, her voice shrill. "Michael, let's just give her what she wants and get rid of her." My father's voice boomed across the room. "You will speak to my daughter with respect. She's here to settle matters rightfully." Michael glared at me, his veneer of control slipping. "Fine, Amelia. What do you want?" I laid out my terms, every demand a strike against his ego and his betrayal. "I want full custody of our daughter. You will have supervised visits until I deem otherwise. As for our finances, I've detailed a fair division, considering your extracurricular activities." Michael's face reddened, a vein throbbing in his temple. "You can't do this to me. I won't let you take everything." But before he could continue, the door burst open. In strode my in-laws, their faces a mix of shock and anger. "Michael, what on earth is going on here?" his father bellowed, his disappointment palpable. Michael turned, a deer caught in the headlights. "Dad, it's not what it looks like." His mother, tears brimming in her eyes, looked at me. "Amelia, we had no idea. We're so sorry." The tables had turned. Michael, once the manipulator, was now cornered by the truth. His parents' arrival was the final blow, stripping away any pretense of innocence. The negotiations were tense, but with the weight of my evidence and the support of my family, Michael had no choice but to agree to my terms. As we left, my father's arm around my shoulders, I felt a sense of closure. The chapter of my life tainted by Michael was ending, and a new chapter, one of hope and strength, was beginning. The soft rustle of leaves and the gentle chirping of birds formed a serene backdrop as I sat on the veranda of my new home overseas. My daughter played at my feet, her innocent laughter a balm to my once weary soul. The rolling hills and sprawling green fields of our new surroundings were a far cry from the stifling confines of my past life. My father, sitting beside me, handed me a cup of tea. "You've done well, Amelia. I'm proud of you." I smiled, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't known in a long time. "Thanks, Dad. It wasn't easy, but I feel like I can finally breathe again." The journey here had been tumultuous. From the ashes of my marriage with Michael, I had risen, stronger and more determined. The divorce had been finalized, with the terms heavily in my favor, thanks to Michael's indiscretions and my unwavering resolve. But the sweetest victory was watching Michael's facade crumble under the weight of his actions. His mistress had left him once she realized the luxurious lifestyle he provided was no longer sustainable. His colleagues and friends, once drawn to his charismatic persona, now saw him for the fraud he was. I had heard through the grapevine that Michael was living a modest life now, his nights of extravagance a distant memory. The man who once held himself above others was now humbled by his own misdeeds. As I watched my daughter chase butterflies across the lawn, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The pain, the betrayal, the fight for justice, it had all led to this moment of tranquility. "I'm thinking of starting a blog," I mused aloud. "Maybe share my story, help others who might be going through similar struggles." My father nodded. "That's a great idea. You have a lot of wisdom to share, Amelia." The sound of a car pulling up the driveway caught our attention. My mother emerged, her arms laden with groceries, her face breaking into a smile as she saw us. "Looks like you two are having a deep conversation," she said, joining us on the veranda. "Just reflecting on the past and planning for the future," I replied, standing up to help her with the bags. As we unpacked the groceries together, I felt a surge of gratitude for my family. They had been my rock through the storm, and now they were my companions in this new chapter of life. The ordeal with Michael was behind me, but it had taught me invaluable lessons. I had discovered my strength, the importance of family, and the power of resilience. Now, as I looked forward to the future, I was filled with hope. Hope for new beginnings, for growth, and for the endless possibilities that lay ahead for my daughter and me.